already started heavy. Yeah, so you're ready to go. You're welcome. No, you don't. That's fine. I didn't even do anything. I didn't even get into PowerPoint for you. Okay, so spa. Let's see.
We got a surprise here. That's for the Community Benefit Fund. Thanks.
Welcome. I'll call the City Council meeting back to order. We've just concluded closed session. I'm waiting here for the City Attorney to make necessary announcements. We're going to have an unusual evening, and we have 4 different meetings, actually. And so after the disclosures, the announcements that are made by the City Attorney, we'll move to have a flag salute and as inspiration given by Mayor Pro Tem Hensley. And at that point, I will recess the City Council meeting and then move into the Housing Authority, and then there's several meetings after that: Surplus Property Authority, Successor Redevelopment Agency, and then we'll return to the City Council agenda. And I'm giving you this information, so if you're waiting around to address the City Council, be patient. I don't expect those meetings to last very long, but you will have to be patient. So with that, we have the arrival of Mr. Green, our City Attorney. Are there announcements that you wish to make from closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, there are 2 reportable actions from tonight's closed session. The first is on closed session item 4A, which was the request for proposals on the Industrial Way property. On a vote of 401, the council has directed that a company known as Gilo is the successful applicant, and directed staff to commence negotiations for the sale of the property. And that was on a vote. 4 were members Figg, Hensley, Sharkey, and Berg, and Councilmember Schnapp abstained. There's also a reportable action on 4B. And with regard to that one, the council has directed staff to issue a request for proposals on that property. It had received an offer, but felt that the public interest called for an RFP, and that was on a unanimous vote of all of the council to that direction. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and I'll raise this question with our clerk. We did go into closed session, but that was actually a separately agendized item. Is that correct? Okay, and so we didn't conclude all the business in closed session, so depending on the lateness of the hour, we'll continue that item until the end of the last item of our City Council meeting, and then determine at that point if we wish to recessed back to closed session. So I don't think we actually formally opened the City Council meeting previously. At this point, I will ask Mr. Hensley, we have a roll call. Have we not done that yet? Or that was simply for the closed session, is that correct? Okay, so we'll begin with an inspiration by Mayor Pro Tem Hensley, and then we'll do the roll call following the flag salute. So we start with the flag salute, then we'll do the inspiration, and then we'll do the roll call. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, everybody, just sit down, get nice and comfortable. I feel better my inspiration, you people are my inspiration. I am so proud of what I'm seeing within this community, the developments where the citizens are becoming more and more involved, taking the initiative, where I'm seeing a generation of interest and encouragement and devotion and a sense of involvement from all of our community. The police department, the public works department, the urban planning department, and much of the staff. I'm seeing a whole different direction, and I'm very proud of it. So I'm inspired, and I hope you are too.
Thank you, Mr. Inslee. So let's do the roll call, and immediately after that, we will recess and then call the Housing Authority meeting to order.
Councilmember Berg.
Here.
Councilmember Schnapp.
Here.
Councilmember Sharkey.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Hensley.
Here.
Mayor Fig.
Here. So with that, I will invite our member to please join us with the Housing Authority. We have a call to order and another roll call, please.
Member Berg.
Here.
Member Brown.
Here.
Member Schnapp.
Here.
Member Sharkey.
Present.
Vice Chair Hensley.
Here.
Chair Fig.
Here, we have an agenda. Do I hear a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So approved. That brings us to consent. Do I hear a motion on that?
Move to approve the
Second.
agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
So be it. So that brings us to Deputy City Manager, and there's a report regarding new procurement policies.
Good evening, board members. Attached in your documents, you have a resolution and a procurement policy that's been revised by staff. During a compliance monitoring review in April of 2016, conducted by HUD, it was determined that the Port Hueneme Housing Authority did not have a board-approved procurement policy. One was submitted for the board's approval. It was approved and submitted to HUD in September of 2016. But in February 7th, 2017, we received a notice from HUD that requested the PHA incorporate new revisions, and so therefore you have a red line document attached to the staff report tonight, and that also a new resolution then be approved by the board so that the procurement policy could be submitted to HUD. Prior to this monitoring review back before April 2016, the Port Hueneme Housing Authority followed the purchasing guidelines written up by the city, so followed the city's guidelines, which were more stringent than HUD requirements. However, HUD does require that a procurement policy following their template is submitted after approval by the board.
Is that the extent of your report?
Yeah.
Any questions of board members? All right, we have a resolution, a request for approval. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so approved. Which brings us now to board member comments, questions, what have you.
I'd just like to make one comment.
Please.
I just want to thank you and let you know that many of the residents were appreciative of that. They cleaned up the sidewalk because it was really a mess. They went out there the next morning, took pictures, sent somebody cleaned it up, and they came back, cleaned it some more. And thank you.
Thanks, staff.
Yes.
Great. We love to hear those kinds of comments. Any other comments for board members? Oh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick note, they were going to put a smoking shelter out there. How far are we along on that?
Yes, so staff will begin working on the capital projects as soon as the budget is approved. We're hoping to bring you, which we already brought to the board, some capital projects, but our budget also needs to be approved. That will be on August 7th, so we're hoping for our next regular meeting, we'll have that approved, and then we'll get underway on all those, the list of projects. Another project too that's pending, and I'll bring that to you probably the second meeting in August, is a report back on the ADA parking, disabled parking along the two streets adjacent to Mar Vista. So I'll bring you a report on that, as well as any improvements that could be made to the parking lot. But staff has gone out to the site with our Public Works Director, Mr. Villafana, and we're just putting that report together. So both on the capital projects list, we'll start on that as soon as our Housing Authority budget is approved, and then subsequent pending items, we'll bring those to you at a later date.
Okay, and one final follow-up question on that. Yeah, during this next report, could we have kind of an idea of the abatement of the smoking within the building itself and how far it's gone along and its success?
Sure, we'll bring you an update on that
Thank
as well.
you.
Thank you.
Unless I hear any other comments, I'll move now to open forum. This is the point in the agenda for anybody in the audience to address. This is the Housing Authority. Remember, it's not the City Council. We're wearing a different hat. So any item that's not on the Housing Authority agenda but does pertain to Housing Authority business, now's your opportunity. So if there's anybody, raise your hand, please. If not, all right, we'll then go to the conclusion of this meeting. I'll adjourn it, and we'll now move to our next meeting, which is going to be the Surplus Property Authority. So again, we need to have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Burke?
Here.
Commissioner Schnapp?
Here.
Commissioner Sharkey?
Present.
Vice President Hensley?
Here.
President Vick?
Here, we have an agenda. Do I hear a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So approved. Then we move to consent. Again, any motions?
Move to approve.
Second.
I heard a motion for approval in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So approved. That brings us to open forum, but we don't have anything here for comments of the authority itself. And I would wonder, at what point does the Surplus Property Authority conclude its official business? Now that the agency no longer holds property at the former NCEL, how long do we need to keep the books open on this particular entity? And that's not a question you need to answer tonight, but it's curious. Is it, when was the last meeting? Oh, it was in April of this year? Is that correct? Okay. And I'm just wondering how much more business really that the Surplus Property Authority has to conduct now that it really has no interest in any real estate holdings.
Sure. I'll get together and work with Attorney Green and respond back to the board on that. I think there may be future uses or reasons that we would want to have the authority in place. So although you're correct that we're not in a position now where we are where we own properties the way we used to, there may be some value to keeping that legal structure in place. So we'll put that on our list
Okay.
and get back to
No
the board.
urgency. For those in the audience who may not be familiar, the Surplus Property Authority was created years ago when the former Naval Civil Engineering Laboratory, which is at the harbor entrance, was accessed through the Base Closure Act, and the city became basically the guardian of that property. Ultimately, it sold most of it to the Harbor District, and then most recently, as a result of the settlement agreement last year, that portion that was retained by the city for aquaculture purposes was also conveyed to the Harbor District. So that's the reason for my question is, does it really continue to have a role to play that we need to recognize it as an official body? So, all right, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting and now move to this is the Successor Redevelopment Agency, and I also need to have a roll call for this, please.
Director Burke?
Here.
Director Schnapp?
Here.
Director Sharkey?
Present.
Vice Chair Hensley?
Here.
Chair Vick?
Here, I have a motion, or can I have a motion for approval on the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So approved. So that brings us to new business, and this has to do with the refunding of bond funds held by the Successor Agency. Who will be making this report? Oh, Mr. Butler.
I'll lead off, Chairman Fig and members of the board. I mentioned back when the City Council adopted the Strategic Action Plan back in March that as important as all of that is, and we take it seriously, there would be other important projects that would probably come up that aren't on our radar or weren't on our radar at that point on March 20th. And this is an example of one of those projects that I think is about as close to a no-brainer as we get in local government. We have an opportunity to take advantage of the low interest rate environment that still exists, and we hope will be around a little bit longer, to refund or refinance some of our existing redevelopment bonds at much more favorable rates and end up saving the city funds and the successor agency funds and benefit the city's general fund in the process. So we're going to have a presentation tonight. We have several guests. Dima Galkin will lead us off. Some of you know Dima from, he's a longtime employee at RSG, our redevelopment and successor agency consulting firm. And he's going to start off with a presentation, and then we'll have a couple of other guests that will be explaining the nitty-gritty details of this opportunity as well after Dima. Dima, come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Honorable City Council. As Rod mentioned, my name is Dima Galkin. I'm with RSG. We've been working for the redevelopment agency for about 20 years and serving the successor agency and oversight board since dissolution began in 2012. One of our responsibilities working for the successor agency is making sure the bonds are paid. And together with Hilltop Securities, we identified that based on current interest rates, as Rod said, there's an opportunity for some bond savings. And these savings will benefit the city's general fund as well as other taxing entities. So we have here today Joseph Yu and Philip Curls from Hilltop Securities. They have a presentation on the specifics of the savings, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions pertaining to the successor agency. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. My name is Joe Yu. With me is my colleague, Philip Curls. We're with First Southwest, a division of Hilltop Securities. Before you this evening is a really short presentation. I know you have a lot of discussion this evening, so we'll make it quick, of the refunding of your current outstanding tax allocation bonds. And we are proposing, or the successor, to refund the tax allocation bonds underneath the successor agency. So if I could point you to actually page 1. Which is your next, page 1 is should be your next slide. I don't know if that, oh, sorry. This is a page of your outstanding tax allocation bonds. Oh, sorry. This is a summary sheet of your existing tax allocation bonds. You have approximately 3.3 million of your R76 project area tax allocation bonds that were issued in 1993. You also have that were issued in the amount of 12.2 million back in 2004 of Central Community Project Area tax allocation bonds. Outstanding as of today is approximately a little over $9 million of bonds outstanding. So what we are proposing is refunding those at a more favorable interest rate. And if I could point you to this slide, the next slide, page 2, which shows you what the 1993 bonds were originally issued at, which is approximately 6.5%. The 2004s were issued at around 4.5%, and we believe we could issue the current bonds or refund them at approximately under 1.5%. So the difference makes up your savings, and we think that could be done at those rates, at those lower rates. And I'd like to bring up my colleague, Philip Curls, who's going to talk a little bit about our a summary of our findings in terms of interest rate savings.
Thank you, Joe. Again, my name is Philip Curls. Mr. Mayor, council members. when successor agencies have the opportunity to refinance or refund outstanding bonds, they typically do it one or two ways. One would be through a public sale, a public bond sale, and then the other would be through a private bond sale. And we looked at both of those options, and given the fact pattern for the successor agency, one actually ends up being more favorable than the other. Just in general, on the public sale side, the successor agency would hire an underwriter, and then on a specified sale date, that underwriter would offer the new bonds to the general market, to Wall Street, to everybody that would potentially buy a bond. And that's when your rates are set. The private option, you would hire a placement agent, and they would then go out and find a bank or a institutional buyer who would buy the entire transaction. And you would, with your financing team and staff, negotiate the rate at which that loan or bond would be sold. So everything is done more of a prearranged after a competitive process. So on the public side, if you look at the graph that's on this page, and there's material difference between the two, but in general, you're probably going to have to sell additional bonds to fund what's called a reserve fund for a public sale, and that's something that you borrow at the sale, and then you get it back in the final year, and that's why you get most of your savings in 2023. So that's something that, if you can, you would like to avoid it. But a public sale more or less is going to ask that you borrow that extra money and then you get it back at the end. As Mr. Butler mentioned, the savings are shared amongst all the taxing entities, and the city being one of them. There's a county piece, there's an educational component. So roughly 16% of the savings are going to be attributed to the city and their general fund, or your general fund. More staff time is involved for the public sale. It's just something that's part of it, and that's something that we understand that the city is sensitive of. So the other option being the private sale, you don't have to sell a reserve fund, so you end up getting your savings level throughout the next 6 years. And given that this is a relatively small bond size and it's maturing only six years, you're going to get a lot of interest from the private sector, from banks, because that's the type of product that they buy. So you're going to get roughly the equal savings every year, and less staff time is used for that method of sale. So kind of given all of those factors together, we would recommend entertaining the private sale for this transaction.
Questions of council members? Actually, successor agency members. You have a question? I do. Oh, please.
Couple of questions. What is the basis of your fee arrangement?
Of our firm's arrangement?
Mm-hmm.
As a financial advisor to the successor agency, I believe we are paid a flat fee.
Okay, so it's not a contingency fee, it's a flat fee?
I will defer to Joe. Is it a contingent?
It is contingent.
It's contingent. Contingent on the successful sale.
Okay.
So no
And-
bond sale, no.
I understand that. Does it vary depending on whether it's a direct placement or a bond sale?
No.
It's the same fee? Okay, that's a good answer. And finally, on what basis did you determine who would be bond counsel? If you know.
Yeah, I'll defer to Mr. Yu.
Thank you, Philip. We actually spoke to a few firms, including RSG, and sought their recommendation. So that's how.
So this firm was recommended by RSG, is that correct?
Yes, and also they asked for our opinion about their activity in this certain space of public finance, and they've done a lot of work in that space.
No, I know who they are.
Yeah.
Were they the bond counsel on the original issuance?
I don't believe so,
Okay.
but I would have to check on that.
Usually I see the original bond counsel used in these refundings, so I'm a little curious as to why that changed.
Yeah, we can get back to you with that answer. Very
Okay,
quickly.
I'd appreciate knowing that. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, yes. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around this situation here, and I'm seeing where we're going to save $2.5 million a year approximately. And then there's the city share of residual distribution, 16%, $64,000 a year savings until 2023. I'm a little confused in this. How much are we going to get and how much are we going to give away? Can you break it down in layman's terms, please?
Well, it's important to, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. It's important to remember that we are refunding these bonds on behalf of the successor agency. So the first, it's going to be for the benefit of all the taxing
Could
entities.
you speak up a little bit, or can we turn the volume up? I'm having a hard time listening.
The refunding will be,
Thank you, sir.
the benefit of the refunding will be shared by all of the taxing entities that are within the redevelopment project area. And the city is a component of those taxing entities. So the 2.4 million that you're seeing is not annually. That is the aggregate cash flow savings that we're projecting that the entire redevelopment project area taxing entities would share. On an annual basis, that's where we go to the other side, where you see on this on the private sale, where you see 64,000 per year. That would be the projected share specifically to the city.
This is based on interest, right? So this is the savings on interest that that the city is going to then achieve. Is projected at 64,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
If I might, and I'm going to engage our city attorney in this conversation because I know he's had a lot of redevelopment experience as well. So the city is the beneficiary 16%. That means 84% of the real benefit goes to other taxing entities. And so the question becomes, they're the ones that are benefiting from our action. And is it unusual for a successor agency to negotiate with its other tax-paying partners and saying, listen, it's our call whether we choose to refund these bonds, and you're going to get a lot of money out of it. So can we not negotiate a port? Well, okay. I've just.
It's a great idea.
Well, this is my problem. We've got problems with animal control services, and we're getting hit hard, and yet we're going to be giving back to the county, the very agency that's hitting us. Okay, we went through this with crossing guards, and the theory behind the crossing guard reduction was because the school districts benefited from the termination of redevelopment.
Well,
I could go on and on.
As an
The
old
library
redevelopment
is another issue, and okay. I think you're getting my point, and I'm
I
wondering,
do.
is it legal for us to negotiate with the other taxing entities and say, listen, what's in it for us? If you're going to be the beneficiary of our, custodial arrangement, then shouldn't we also benefit from the services received?
I don't believe it's permissible.
I would like to delay this and have that issue explored, because it's a lot of money that the county and the other taxing entities would be receiving at our expense, basically.
Well, and I am not an apologist for counties ever, but we have to remember that the money that comes to pay the debt and interest on these bonds was taken when the project area was formed from these affected taxing
I
entities.
understand that.
They
I
would have
understand.
gotten the money if we hadn't formed the project
But
area.
we
So
have the
they're-
choice not to refund the bonds, is that correct?
We do.
Yes.
If I were them, I would sit there and say, if you want to cost yourself $64,000 a year, go ahead.
Well, or they're going to forego $300,000 a year. So how much is that $300,000 worth to you in the way of, again, the services that we're having to pay for, that they're getting money in return for doing nothing.
You know what? I think it's a great question to ask. I sincerely hope we can. I don't believe we can.
Okay, I would like
What I
to-
would like is for Nossaman to give us an opinion on that.
Well, we can certainly run that down.
Yeah, and if they don't want
but
to,
you-
then they can call me and we'd discuss it.
I would
You-
prefer, excuse me, I would prefer to task our city attorney with this question. I want an independent assessment. I don't want to have somebody that has a financial stake in the process.
All right?
Thank you for your presentation, but I think we're going to have to defer this until our first meeting in August, unless the city council disagrees with my assessment. Do I have any thoughts?
Well, Mr. Mayor, may I ask the city attorney on this, having been involved with this very confusing mess from the beginning. Isn't there case law that speaks to that very question? Wasn't this actually litigated at the very beginning of the process? The percentages were laid out, and I know cities.
No, there's no case law on this specific
The
issue
specific
on
point.
refunding of bonds that I'm aware of.
Yeah, 'cause
I'm aware of of what you're talking about. There was a great deal of litigation in the old days before they.
No, I think what Mr. Sharkey's saying is that, yes, there's an established percentage that each of the taxing entities benefit from our actions. I think the question here is that we're not compelled to refund the bonds, which means that
No.
we're holding $300,000+ for the benefit of other taxing entities. What are we going to get in return? That's my question.
I think it would be I think the League of Cities would hold a parade in our honor if we could. If we came
I'm
up
not
with this.
interested in being a poster child. I just want a fair shake.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we've consulted with other agencies that have asked the exact same question, and the feedback that we've received from multiple bond councils is that that is not allowed per the statute that allows the refunding. The Department of Finance, California Department of Finance, authorizes the successor agency for the refunding, and it's through that those statutes that these transactions are even possible. And because there isn't a path that's laid out in those statutes for the kind of sharing that you're speaking of, from our experience, that hasn't been allowed. That isn't to say that we shouldn't have the city attorney or Nossaman confirm that, but from our experience, that has not been allowed.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts, questions?
I was just, excuse me, curious, is this time sensitive?
It's time sensitive in that interest rates can rise and savings can move away from you. However, as you saw in the slides before, the other bonds are at 6.5%, 4%, and you're at the short side of the yield curves. The chances that interest rates are going to rise that substantially, that fast, are relatively low. But again, they're subject to interest rate movements.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to postpone this, could we ask that it come back? Could it come back at the next meeting? Would that give Mr. City Attorney enough time, or City Manager?
When is the next meeting?
Monday, August 7th. We've got a 3-week break this time.
Yes, that's possible.
And if it's possible that you can achieve an answer in advance, and if there is a time-sensitive nature that interest rates could rise, perhaps we could call a special meeting if need be. And then we'll have to also have a conversation with the successor agency oversight board.
Yes, there's interesting administrative problems to this issue now that we have this DOF agency dissolution process, because we no longer have, as an agency, we no longer have the direct authority to do a lot of things. We can only do them with permission. But like I said, I've never heard of this issue before, so we'll see what is said about it. As an alternative, if there is concern about the interest, we could undertake this. You could approve the item subject to the city attorney's conclusion that it's not permissible to negotiate. And if I conclude that it is, then the matter will come back on your next agenda. And that way you wouldn't have to see it again if I were, and I would give you council an email that explains what my determination is.
I would suggest as part of your exploration, because I've had some involvement in disposing of former redevelopment property, and it is not uncommon for the Oversight Board and the taxing entities to agree to downgrade the potential reuse of property. And I'll give you an example: land to be held for conservation purposes rather than to be developed. And the agencies agreed, we just as soon see it be lay fallow and not have it built to its highest and best use. And there's an example of foregoing revenue opportunity. So I think you need to dig a little deeper as to what the authorities are.
Well, I suspect, based on I won't tell you how many years of practicing in municipal law, that there's not going to be a black letter law answer to this. I think what it's going to come down to is an interpretation of statutes and ultimately a guess. And so what you'll get, I mean, if there's a black letter, but I'm sure there isn't because these gentlemen would probably know about it, then you'll get my best guess.
Fair enough.
So are we going to change the motion to allow the city attorney to investigate, and if he finds that there would be no impact, that we go ahead with this refinancing, or what we're doing here?
My preference would be to get a report back. And if we need to have a special meeting because he's able to conclude his research in advance of the next regular meeting, that we conduct such a special meeting. And then, if it's necessary, we'll have to have a similar session with the Oversight Board. I just think that this is an issue. There's a lot of money that's potentially at stake, and I think it's worth fully vetting.
I second Mayor Figg's motion on that. I think it's something that we need to really examine and study. No reflections, boy. These are boggling mind areas for me. I need to understand it more too. So, and I think 1 month is not going to kill us yet. So, thank you so much for me.
You know, I just also want to mention that thanks for bringing this up, because any kind of savings to the bottom line is going to help, and so this is some creative way of doing that. So appreciate the involvement of the information that we're being presented tonight. Thank you.
Probably back on August 7th if one or both of you are available. We'll keep you posted.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that an acceptable, do we need to vote?
No, you don't need to vote. That's direction to staff.
Yeah.
Sufficient? Great. All right, so that then actually brings us to open forum. So now's another opportunity for the public to address this body on anything that's not on the successor agency redevelopment agenda. So any hands? All right. Seeing none, I will close out the meeting for the the successor redevelopment agency. And that means that we return now to we'll convene the city council meeting that we concluded earlier in the evening and get to the point in the agenda. I think we're actually just to the approving the agenda. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that brings us now to open forum for the city council. And again, this is really to deal with any item that isn't on the calendar that we're going to be discussing this evening. So if there's anyone that wishes to address us, now's the time. All right, seeing none, that brings us to presentations. And I believe, I'm not sure who the party is here that will be taking charge of this item. Is there a staff member here that's...
Actually, I think we'll go ahead and have Ashley Clendenine come up.
Hello.
So I'm here from the Ventura County Fairgrounds. This is this year's poster for our Rooted in Tradition. This is by a 13-year-old Anna Sorensen of Simi Valley. So presenting you guys with our poster. Wanted to go over just our fair dates, the 2nd through the 13th of August, and go over our special admission days. The first day of fair is Dollar Day before 3 p.m. It's motorsports for our entertainment that night. The third is Feed the Need food drive. So if you bring 5 canned foods, you'll get a ticket for a returned admission for any other day of the fair. Smash Mouth and Sugar Ray will be performing that evening. August 4th is Kids Day, so that's free for children under 12 years and a discounted admission for the parents of $9. Huey Lewis and the News will be performing that evening. Saturday, August 5th is our fair parade in downtown Ventura, and then we also have a performance by Casey and the Sunshine Band that evening. Sunday the 6th is Dia de la Familia, which our grandstand entertainment would be Noel Torres, Banda Carnaval, and Chiquis Rivera at 3 p.m. The 7th would be a Carnival wristband day, so that is a wristband for the children to ride the rides for $30, all unlimited rides, and Billy Currington will be our grandstand that evening. Tuesday the 8th is Seniors and Persons with Disabilities Day, so they would get in for free. Seniors are considered anybody over the age of 65. Kenny Babyface Edmonds will be our performance that evening, and the Spinners in the afternoon. Wednesday, August 9th is 3 Before 3 Day, and Shinedown will be our performance for that evening. August 10th is Military Appreciation Day, and Gabriel Iglesias, the comedian, will be our performance that evening. August 11th is our Junior Livestock Auction in the Clark Pavilion, and Winona and the Big Noise is our performance that evening. And then August 12th and 13th are both our PRCA Rodeo at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m.
Great, thank you very much.
Can I mention? So, do you represent the Junior Fair Board?
I don't. We actually don't have a Junior Fair Board this year. I am actually an employee. I work up in the front office. I actually am a previous Junior Fair Board member, though. But we don't have a Junior Fair Board this year.
Oh, that's
hoping to bring it back next year.
That's unfortunate. Okay, I just wanted to mention that I've been going, each year for many years now, and last year was the first year that I attended the rodeo. I'd never really been attracted to rodeo, but I just sat by myself and enjoyed some really nice performances. So want to extend that really just gratitude to have that and continuing to have that as part of the fair. I think it brings a lot of families together. I saw a very diverse crowd. Many different ages, and color is not, so thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
I do.
Of course.
One of the things that when I visit the city of Oxnard, they have kind of a walking exhibit of all the fair posters over the years. Are they still in print? If we were to do the same sort of thing, or anybody for that matter, can they purchase or acquire posters from the past?
We do have multiple different years. I don't know. We have a log of all the ones that we do have available for sale. Some of them have become collector's items,
Right.
and we don't have them any longer, but we do have a good majority of over the years available for purchase, yeah.
Great, well, we'll start with yours.
Yeah, and this one's for you guys, so.
Thank you very much.
It's recording them.
Well, maybe not. So we'll just put it here for those that are interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to consent agenda. Do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so approved. So that brings us to Public Works Director. We have a couple of oral reports, I believe.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Tonight we have, first up, unfortunately, we're requesting authorization to remove the coral tree in front of the City Hall. And it is recommended that the City Council authorize Public Works to remove the coral tree located in front of the City Hall. And as you know, recently a number of trees, coral and pine trees, have fallen in the city due to infestation, disease, and dry rot that was brought about by the drought conditions. And the large coral tree that's located in front of our city hall has become a liability to the city. Coral trees have a history of failing due to their density and multifaceted trunks. As the tree grows, it'll separate as the multifaceted trunk and damage the remainder of the tree trunks, leaving the tree unstable. The tree has two primary trunks grown together, and this is a known hazard for the species. As it continues to grow, the trunks will push against each other until a catastrophic failure. This, coupled with the large decayed areas in the buttress root, and it has not responded to soil injection treatments, is indicative of a failure. Regular maintenance and constant monitoring of this tree by our city arborist has extended its useful life. However, in May, our city arborist identified a structural deficit, and it shows approximately 23% of the trunk has a 2 to 3 foot cavity. And additionally, diseased roots have been identified, and the foundation has been compromised, and the tree continues to slowly die. It is the recommendation of our city arborist to me that the tree be removed as quickly as possible to avoid potential injury to the public when entering or exiting the city hall. The municipal code states that the director or city manager can remove trees in the event they pose a risk to the public safety. So we're asking for council action to give authorization to remove that tree.
Questions?
I have a couple. I'd like to,
please.
first of all, move approval for this, but I have a couple of questions. How many coral trees do we have in town?
I don't have that information. We do have a survey of it. I just don't have that information tonight.
Good. Any idea on what kind of tree we might want to move to in the future?
I don't know. Staff kicked around the idea of possibly some sort of art feature there. So we haven't determined anything yet.
Good, thank you.
I do have a question. So thank you, Mr. Villafana. It's kind of sad to see that these trees are, have like the water and then it just starts a really bad process here. That tree has been used for the holiday tree lighting, is it not? That's the main one.
Yes, it has.
So we'll have to maybe even consider another place if we do that event again this year, but yeah, it's sad. I think there was another coral tree that was affected not long ago at Wainimi Road and Ventura Road, and one of the limbs kind of broke loose and all. So thanks for this report. I look forward to having another tree here at City Hall, but we'll leave that up to you for a recommendation.
Well, we look for input from the city council too. As I said, possibly an art feature could go there too.
Yeah. I like the living, breathing things here.
Certainly,
Thanks.
whatever the consensus is.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Villafana, discussion of the plant palette in the city goes back a long, long way, back to the days of Tony Young. We used to talk about whether or not the plant palette we have is really appropriate or not. And I think now that we're dealing with probably a new normal of reduced rainfall and water consumption, I'd like to encourage some kind of a reexamination of the trees we do have. There was a big push for coral trees, and my goodness, when they're in bloom, they're really nice, but that may not be the most appropriate tree for this environment. And off the top of my head, I have no suggestions, but as we're going to have to start replacing some of these older trees, perhaps we ought to do some kind of a coherent plan for what trees may be more durable in the face of drought conditions and maybe more appropriate for the local environment. So, I'd like to encourage that kind of view from staff on this.
Certainly, we can look into that.
Other questions?
They're great trees, and it's kind of like having a baby alligator in your tub. It's cute when it's young, but as it gets big, it kind of outgrows the system. At Wainimi Bay, we had one of those that came down 2 years ago, tore up part of our roof of our clubhouse. And as nice as they look, They're not really adaptable, it seems like, to this area because of the variances of the water. And personally, I think we should look to, trees are great, but we should look to trees that are conducive to drought-tolerant, coastal-friendly environment as much as we can, and get something that's got a nice, pretty look to it. And we can put Christmas tree lights on it if we want.
We consult with our city arborist and also possibly some local landscape architects.
Well, I'd like to suggest that you kind of share notes with Mr. Stewart, the Deputy Community Development Director. The city went through quite a process of coming up with a plant palette, not just trees. Coral trees is the theme tree for the city, just like other cities have theme trees. So rather than start to, I agree with Mr. Sharkey, we need a kind of a broader assessment. If this is going to be a reoccurring problem with all of our corals, then I would see the need to change out our plant palette. But we also have ground cover, we have shrubs that all have created a certain character for this community. And so I don't want to go about this in a piecemeal fashion. And I would suggest that you get together with Mr. Stewart, pull out because we do have adopted landscape guidelines. In fact, we employ those when there are new developments, we require them to conform. So we've been, carrying on this thematic treatment, not just on public property, but private as well. And so I think it's worthy of looking at a different palette. And Mr. Hensley, he's agrees that or I agree with him that we are entering a period of time that we're going to be having to deal with these kinds of drought conditions on a reoccurring basis, and perhaps we do need to start retooling our standards, so to speak. So that's how I would like to see this. Is not just a matter of let's attack this one problem, but let's take a look at it maybe in a broader way as to if we need to rechange our thinking about our entire plant palette.
Very good. I will get together with Mr. Stewart.
Okay.
And I just want to remind everybody, especially those maybe that are watching on TV or those here in the audience, is that a few years ago, the city of Port Hueneme did become a Tree City USA, because of the investment that we do make with our trees and landscaping and all. So just FYI, we really like our trees here, and I'd encourage anything that we can to preserve that kind of look. Thank you.
Okay, I have a speaker card, Mr. Stephen Gama. Oh, there he is, Mr. Gama.
Thank you, Mayor Fig and City Council. I live at San Miguel Circle next to the park, and as I was sitting here listening to you describe two trees at the end of my cul-de-sac. Over the 20 years that I've lived there, I've seen at least 2 or 3 times a year where a fairly decent sized coral tree snaps away and falls down on a sidewalk, falls across the roadway into Beachport Villas or Surfside Village. So as you're describing this tree here, I'm thinking that sounds like the tree at the end of my cul-de-sac. And so what I'm trying to point out is that you've identified a risk, you're citing safety as the reason to remove this tree, and I would strongly encourage you to get out there and look for other trees, because in the event that somebody gets whacked, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, because I'm telling you, it happens several times a year, then you've just created a bigger liability problem for you. So the way you described that tree, I know at the end of my cul-de-sac, these trees are huge, and they have split, like you said, and there's a big opening between them. And so now I understand the mechanism as the failures occur. And so I just want to encourage you to take the additional step to try and identify trees that pose risk, because it really is truly amazing that nobody has been injured in the 20 years that I've lived around Miranda Park. And every time I see one of those branches snap, it just makes me curdle, because many times it's right across the walkway in the park. So I just want to encourage you to be proactive and hopefully get in front of any misfortune that may be out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gama. I'll bring it back to the council. What is your, do I have a motion?
Move to approve the removal of that tree and move forward with an examination of the collective aspects of our trees around and possibly looking more at the coastal-friendly, drought-tolerant type of landscape, because we should be setting the example. And in regard to what we had a little bit a while ago in Port Hueneme Water Agency, we're still hurting for water, and we probably will be hurting even more for water down the path, because I don't see all of a sudden our rain patterns changing for any significant amount of time. So
That's a pretty long-winded motion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, may I request that the Mayor Pro Tem limit the motion to approving the request and provide the rest as direction to staff?
Just as the attorney said.
Thank you, sir.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
So approved. Okay, so that brings us to item B, which is regarding contracting for renovation of tennis courts. So please take it.
This is, we're asking authorization to award a contract to MTM Construction to rehabilitate 6 tennis courts at Miranda Park. And it's recommended that the City Council authorize Public Works Director to award a contract to MTM Construction to rehabilitate the 6 tennis courts at Miranda Park. The City Council directed staff to prepare plans for the restoration of the facilities at Miranda Park. A civil engineering consultant was retained, Mr. Tim DeZamora. The firm performed a site inspection and provided recommendations for a multi-phase rehabilitation program. The consultant prepared plans and specifications for the rehabilitation of 6 tennis courts, Phase 1. The city took advantage of the National Joint Powers Authority, NJPA, which competitively bid construction tasks with preset unit prices and specifications for general construction services, including materials, equipment, and labor costs. The California Government Code, Section 6500, authorizes public agencies to participate in cooperative purchasing agreements like those established by the NJPA, while still remaining within the city's adopted rules and procedures for purchasing. A job walk was held, and MTM Construction submitted a proposal in the amount of $153,294,081. Staff has reviewed it in this proposal and recommends award. The fiscal impact will be $154,000. We rounded it up slightly. The City Council has allocated surplus property authority funding for this project.
Questions of staff? Please.
Just for the public's benefit, 2 questions here. Number 1, these are restricted fund that's been committed to this for a long period of time, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not taking, that's the only way the money can go anyway. So as far as I know, it's been 3 or 4 years or more, so I think we should move on to it. Number 2, is there any possibility of getting some of this done before Labor Day for the tennis tournaments that's coming?
After authorization tomorrow, I'm going to ask for a construction schedule from MTM Construction, and I feel cautiously optimistic that we'll have 2 of the tennis courts ready by that time. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have it all completed by Labor Day.
But some. Unless there's other comment, move to approve.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. So approved. Moving now to beach capital improvement planning.
This, I have some photographs that the city clerk is going to put up so I can walk through this. Let's see. Okay, well, these are the, we going to do this or are you going to do them? Oh, you're going to do them up there, okay. When I first got here, I went to the beach and inspected the facilities. And what I found was a beach that had been neglected and a lot of deferred maintenance for whatever reason. This was a picnic bench that was typical of what was out there. The concrete picnic bench, cracked, rebar exposed. It was a hazard. We have a very talented street crew, and they patched it. Would you want to go to the next slide? Picture. This is what it looks like now. The street crew repaired the concrete, and this was a team effort. Our facilities crew then painted it and then painted the windscreens. This is typical of all our concrete picnic benches out there now. Go to the next one. This was the small restroom at the end of Ventura Road before we did anything. This is what it looks like now. This was a team effort. We had our landscape, our street, and our facilities crew paint the exterior and add a security bar. We also replaced the gate there. Look at the next one. This is what it looked like before the interior. This is what it looks like now. Again, it was a team effort. Our facilities crew and street crew patched the floor, the wall, and we had a very thorough cleaning of the small restroom. This is the large restroom before. This is the large restroom afterwards. We painted the exterior, we replaced the skylights. Go to the next one. This is what it looks like inside. You can see we painted the ceiling white. We did a very thorough cleaning of it, and we replaced the interior lights. Going farther down the promenade near the small restroom, those steps were a safety hazard. You can see that they were cracked, broken, uneven. Our streets crew, again, is very talented. We patched them. Go to the next one. That's what it looks like today. They just finished that today. They haven't finished that area yet. We're going to seal it, and then we're going to paint it a concrete gray. And it's really been a team effort. Our street crew, our landscape crew, and our facilities crew. Currently, we are working on, we salvaged an old shower that was taken down during the area where there was heavy erosion several years ago. Our facilities crew is rehabilitating that, and we will have another shower near the small restroom within 2 weeks. The further plans are we plan to start painting the green light poles, working out from the pier until we have completed all of them. And what we've done is we've, in the last 3.5 months, caught up with many years of deferred maintenance. We've got it to a place where now we could look at what additional facilities we want to add out there. And some of the suggestions have been additional picnic tables, et cetera, but this is where we are now. Any questions?
Questions, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Villafana. These are wonderful before and after photos, and thanks to the hard work of your team. The shower that you talked about, that was the one that came down when the beach eroded really badly at the end?
Yes.
Over by where the start of the promenade. So I would prefer that shower be over there because that's where the surfers are. Versus there's already a shower around the large bathrooms, is there not?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, so I know, I look out there every day, and if the weather's good and the waves are good, there are still a lot of surfers out there. That's what I would suggest, if there isn't any other possible way of getting it out there. I don't know if we're really limited to space towards the end there.
We'd have to do some more improvements out there because we lost that one. This one would be on the other side of this wall, and we uncovered the old plumbing. We rehabbed that old plumbing, and it's in an area where fairly well protected, so unless we have another round of excessive beach erosion, it shouldn't be affected. So we'll be able to put one at least near the small restroom, which is still a ways from the large restroom.
Correct.
Ultimately, yes. We have parts for the other one that was salvaged, and that would be a long-term, goal, possibly, if not this year, possibly in the spring. We'd be able to get one back out there.
Right, that would be my recommendation, but if it's already on your map for a short-term, potential long-term, putting it back out there, that would be the goal. Thank you.
Other questions? Please.
Absolutely commendable, Mr. Villafana. It's fantastic what you've done, and it's languored for a long time, so we're on our move. We're trying to make a nice-looking beach again, and you're spearheading this whole operation. The one thing that we'd had a discussion for in the bathroom, the small bathroom, is there still a feasibility of putting some sort of privacy area in there for the the people?
Yes, I looked at it, I measured it so that we would be in compliance with the ADA. We are, I have a set of plans. Our street crew is going to start next week putting in 2 small privacy screens. So yes, that is being done.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
I had one more question, though. Thank you. That brought up the other discussion that we had for the women's bathrooms. You showed one of the photos of where your crew has gone in there and have painted the roof white and really cleaned it up. Was that the men's or the women's?
That was the men's.
That was the men's. So it's very similar to what the women then have.
Yes.
We didn't put any doors up on the individual stall areas for the women?
Not at this time. That is still something we have to look at. My big concern is whatever we do, it has to be in compliance with the American Disabilities Act. Our first thought was to put one up on the ADA stall, and then that would provide privacy there, and then look at possibly, now that we're going to start closing the large restroom at night, and there's less likely of the severe vandalism we've had, so potentially we could put doors on there. That certainly could be something that down the road we can do.
Gosh, that's what I would recommend. Yeah. Thank you.
You're on the right track. My question has to do with the longer-term vision for the beach, and I think that was what the strategic plan was anticipating. Next month, I understand, we'll be establishing or activating a community-wide Citizens Advisory Committee. It would seem to me that we ought to engage the public in looking at that what is the long-term capital improvements to look like? We've heard requests of adding additional restroom facilities on the promenade, going out to the lighthouse. And there's a host of items or wish list things that I think the public would like to communicate. And so I don't know, do you have a process in mind for engaging the public?
One of the concepts that I had was to get a large display showing the promenade, and then possibly some workshops asking for input, posting it on our city website, asking for a possible input. As I said, we may have, if the council would like, we could have a special workshop with displays and solicit information. But be aware that any new structure and everything, there's going to be permitting process with the Coastal Commission, et cetera. So any large new facility is going to take time to get that down. But certainly in the conceptual phase, if directed, we could have some public workshops to solicit ideas from the public.
Great. Are you asking for any direction at this point? This was just an informational.
Tonight was an update, and I wanted to show you where we are, how far we've come, and that the next phase, of course, is exactly what you're talking about. We've gotten the facility to a point where all the existing things are to a pretty good condition. And our plan is for next spring is to start a preventative maintenance program in April. We plan to repaint those bathrooms in April. We plan to patch and repair and paint the picnic tables. So by Memorial Day, we have everything to the level that it is today. And that's the plan for the spring.
Great. Unless there are any other questions, you're still on board here, so it's the traffic and pedestrian safety plan that you're going to update us on?
Correct. We've got okay. The first thing we did is we started looking at crosswalks throughout the city. And want to go to the next one? Okay. Okay. We upgraded 11 crosswalks with the new highly reflected, and this came about both as from my inspection of the city and also from citizen input. We have the first one is out by let's see, see,
Hemlock?
what, I can't read the,
Number one?
yeah, the number one there.
Yeah, Hemlock.
Near Hemlock, it's, and Cove, it's Seaside Drive and Cove. We upgraded that, and what we've done is we've put the reflective signs, the 2-foot wide stripes, and the reflective markers in the path of travel. The next one was Clara, and we did the same thing there. And then we had Joyce and one area along Bubbling Springs bike path that we did. If you want to go to the next picture. Oh, that's me. Okay. Okay. Here is Seaside Cove looking north, and you can see the reflective pavement markers in the path of travel. When they're driving at night, those will reflect, and you'll see them. Okay, here's Clara Street looking west. Clara Street looking east. Of course, we have them in both directions. Clara Street looking west at Florence, near the school. And this is on Joyce near Bubbling Springs, and that's the bike path. And that's looking the other direction. Now, here's Surfside. Here we upgraded 7 crosswalks. All the crosswalks on Surfside Drive have been upgraded. There's Surfside looking west. That's once you round the corner there. That's looking the other direction. Here's coming back towards the performing arts area. That's looking the other direction, west. There we go again, looking east as we get closer to the pavilion. That's looking the other direction. And here, right there, as we come, we start right there. That is the Pavilion Performing Arts Center there. Looking the other direction, you see the flags. There you go. And here is the bike path. And then here we go going north on Surfside towards Wainimi Road. That's by not far from Industrial. Got continuing. And just looking, you can see the red flags and the fluorescent signs. That is the new standard, and the standard is dictated by the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices and Standard Engineering Practice. And whenever we're replacing the old signs, you're to go with these new highly reflective signs. And that's it. Our goal is to go throughout the city and upgrade these. The good thing is, this is all being funded by gas tax. And in November, the new gas tax will be taking effect. I anticipate those funds to come in sometime in February. So this is just the first phase of the traffic and pedestrian safety, and that was the crosswalks. Some of the future things we're going to be doing is we have one radar speed sign as you travel south on Ventura Road. With gasoline tax money, we're going to purchase several more and place them strategically in the city. And that'll be happening later this year and in the spring. Are there any questions?
Questions of staff? As speed humps out of the realm of possibility, because in addition to crosswalks, we have some internal residential streets that tend to be thoroughfares. Is that still a possibility?
Yes. Amazingly, the city did not have a standard for speed bumps / humps. I'm in the process of doing that, and you can put them in residential. That's where you typically do that. Mm-hmm. You want to be careful with your placement of them, and honestly, we're understaffed, and I haven't had the time to thoroughly vet out all the potential locations, but that is on the work table to do.
Great. Other questions? So again, this is just for information purposes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So unless I hear any more questions, then we'll move to the final item you have, the status of the water rate study.
For this one, Steve is going to be giving the report on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Villafana. Mayor Fig, members of council. I was asked to provide an update on the Raftellus Financial Consultants water rate analysis and cost of service study. In speaking with the consultant, over the last probably 4 or 5 months, we've been giving them information related to the rates, customer classifications, water usage patterns, water purchases, water sales, and they've compiled this data, and including up to last week, they've been continuing to ask us for additional information. We've been supplying this information to them. They informed me that they are about 85% complete with the rate model. They anticipate having the next step is a 2-hour web-based training session with myself and the finance staff to review the rate model and to look at the information and make sure that the information that we've provided to them is accurately shown and depicted in the rate model. If there's any irregularities, we'll take the time to correct those. We'll just do a cursory review and make sure that it looks appropriate. The consultant mentioned that they would be in position to return this draft review to council either at the last meeting in August or the first meeting in September. If that's appropriate. I didn't know if there was going to be a August meeting or one meeting as a result of summertime, so I did not get a commitment from them regarding that. Our goal would be to finish the review of the rate model, and then once we're certain that that is all the information that they need, then we'll schedule the date for it to be presented to council. And with that, if there's any other questions, I'll be more than happy to ask.
Questions to staff? No, thank you very much for the updates. We very much appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, so that brings us to item 9A, Chief of Police. What time did you set it for?
10.
Good jokes.
There's a problem with the content. What did you say, Chief?
Can we delay my presentation while I go and fix this really quick? Should take about 5 minutes. Do we have something else on the calendar?
No, we'll be glad to bump you, and we'll call up our Deputy City Manager, item 10A, for an update on live streaming. I do have a speaker that wanted to address us on 9A, so I haven't forgotten you. We'll call you up when the chief returns.
Good evening, council. Tonight is a verbal presentation to bring you an update on the live streaming. This is a follow-up to the verbal report that was given on June 5th, intended to update the council at the time on improvements to the live streaming of city council meetings. There were 7 areas that were identified that evening, and I'll go through those as well. So one of the areas was the voice and visual. Basically, those were out of sync, so adjustments have been made to the voice and visual on those features, and I believe that we haven't received any other complaints. We've tested our audio and video, and those seem to be working fine. If there are buffering issues on the side of the receiver, we believe those to be possibly the internet connection at the receiver's end, as those complaints have been very inconsistent. So we do not believe those to be on our side. It seems like our system's working fine, but there may be still some ongoing issues on the receiver's end. We had an upgrade of the file system, which helped the city's end. So we made some progress in that area. We do suggest that if the public is experiencing connection issues, that they contact us. Perhaps our IT department can help them go through checking their site. Of course, the IT department is not here during meetings, but we can arrange something where we can maybe remotely, not to their connection, but maybe through the phone system, we're able to guide them, and so they can check out their connectivity issues. They can also contact their provider for that. So again, the audio and video is in sync now. There was a delay between those two. With the FiOS connection completed, the city's website and internet service is working much quicker. And this is when we're talking about loading up meetings and making meetings available. The loading of meetings to the host system is much quicker. However, it still takes people to do this task, meaning that after tonight's meeting, first thing tomorrow morning, our IT manager will upload the meeting to our host site, Suite 1, and then after it goes through a process, they were uploaded and put it on, make it available to the public. That probably cannot happen anywhere, probably before 10 o'clock the next morning. So it's not really something that we can expedite any quicker than that. It really takes staffing uploading it and then staff on the Suite 1's end to then make it available to the public. That was item number 2. Item number 3 is the camera positioning and control. We are testing that system tonight. Our intern, Steven, is back there in the back testing our cameras. So we're working with the equipment that we had before. We have 2 cameras that are positioned, one that looks out at the council and the dais, and the other that zooms into the speaker and this table here, the staff table. With the new controls that we have purchased, we're able to pan out to the audience, we're able to zoom into the speakers and the staff table, and then we're able to zoom into the city council. So Steven's helping us tonight, and then that assignment will be then picked up by someone else. We'll reach out to the Oxnard College as suggested by council members, but also it'll have to be someone that controls that. One of the features, those are the 3 completed items so far. We have 4 outstanding ones that are still in progress. One of those is transitioning the overhead presentation. So right now, if you were to log into our live stream meeting, what you would see is that the overhead presentation is a panning of the camera. What we want to do is make that a part of the video so that we can pan right into the video, the actual, not the screen, but the actual computer, if you will, so that the public can follow along with the presentations. Right now, they're at our mercy that they might be able to see that screen, but it's not a good visual for them, so we're working on that. The second thing we're continuing to work on is a Skyping ability. That is something that I believe that we could do internally. We just are gonna need the assistance of our facilities maintenance, who's been very helpful, by the way, and so I just, in the presence of Mr. Don Villafana, the Public Works Director, and the City Council and the public, want to definitely say that the facilities has been a big help to our IT department. They have a good partnership in getting these things done internally so that we're not having to scope it out and contract it out. So again, the Skyping ability, I believe, is something that we're going to be able to get going here. We've got a little more research to do and probably some additional wiring that facilities maintenance staff will provide for us. Regarding the legal issues of the Brown Act and quorums and things like that, we'll have our city attorney look into that, but for now, it's been council's direction to have that capability, so we will, we're working on that, and we hope to bring that to you soon. One other item that is also pending is the current monitors that you have on your dais. There are some concerns that maybe we need to have a little bit more flexibility with the use of the monitor. For example, one of the suggestions was, rather than the city council or the board members having a thick packet of, the agenda packet, is this something that they could, on their monitor, be able to have available? We're going to have to look at that. These monitors right now are running off the computer system, so whatever's in the computer is what you see on your monitor. It was intended for presentations when this was originally built some years ago. So that's all the use of it now. So we'll have to see if there's a split screen where not only are you seeing the presentation, but at your will, you could toggle into your agenda packet or another item that could be loaded. But again, right now it's a shared monitor, so it's feeding off one system. So we'll have to look into that. If that's not possible, then we'll come back to you, depending. We'll have to request for proposals or quotes, and then just explore other options if that's not a possibility. The other concern with the monitors is being able to view the public or view the presentation table. Those monitors do fold up and down. You probably noticed they've been played with, and so you're probably noticing that they're probably laying down a little further down than what you're used to. Maybe you've had to adjust them. Again, without having to do a lot of construction when these were first installed, they were installed on so that you can move them, but it doesn't leave the size of them. You can't visually see them that well if you lay them flat and you want to look over it. So that's still an item that we're exploring is the monitors. And then the final item, that was item number 6. The final item is indexing of meetings. We have received a proposal from Suite One. That's our current live streaming host. And we will be working with them on, we have some other questions that we want to explore with them, but the indexing would allow either the city clerk or our designated cameraman to index the meetings as we're moving along, so that when members of the public want to go back to a recording, they can go right to the agenda item that they want to go into. After the meeting's been uploaded, they can go directly to that item and not have to scroll through where they think that item may begin. So that's another item that we're working on. So that's really the update I have on you. We've got 3 completed items with 4 pending. I'm hoping to bring you an update at the second meeting of August, if not a report with the completion of this project. We were allocated $7,500 under the strategic plan. We're hoping that we can stay within that $7,500, with the exception of if we're having to manipulate the monitors or provide a different system. We'll come back to you with that report, but that might be the more costly one. So hope to bring you something at the end of August.
Great. Any questions? Please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Nichols, do we have a count on the number of people that are streaming the meeting, either live or in an archive?
The last time the city clerk did it was back in June when we reported on it. We can get you that. I don't have the information. I'd be guessing
curious.
at it. It just depends. Sometimes we're getting 2 people that are going on live streaming. Sometimes we're getting more than that. I mean, it just really varies. Maybe it's the topic of the meetings. I'm not sure, but it varies. Maybe 80 at one point might be one of the highest numbers.
So somewhere between 2 and 80.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor Fig. Ms. Nichols, thanks so much. I appreciate a couple of different questions. Number one, the camera angles, they're going to be moved differently?
So the camera angles right now, for example, the camera in the back gets the entire dais. With the new systems, we're able to focus in or zoom in on any one person that's sitting up here. The other camera angle then faces this staff table and the podium, as well as gets a big area of the audience. So the camera angles aren't being moved lower, they're staying where they're at, but we have the ability to zoom in or pan out more.
I thought that we were going to look at the idea, because I'm one of the few guys here that's bald, but it has a tendency to reflect. No, in other words, we can't see the faces and the lips when people are talking. So consequently, I'd hope that we're looking at the change of the camera angles. I don't think it'd be that difficult to change. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of work. A
Okay.
little bit of extra feet of wires, but we could bring that down maybe 10 feet, 8 feet, and I don't know about here. Usually when people are on podium, you can't catch very much. I don't know what the new system is going to look like. Also, I just got a report in that somebody at home is receiving, they can't get a full picture. They checked on 3 different computers and 2 carriers. No, they only get a 3-inch picture. Is that an anomaly, or is that from that side, or is that something we haven't got tested out yet, or what? Do you have
I'd
any
have to
idea?
look at, see what you're talking about, so if you don't mind taking, well, if they could take snap the picture of whatever it is and.
Oh, they're listening to you right now. They'll
Okay,
try to do that
and then we
for
can
you.
send it to the IT manager and see if he can look at it. I was watching the meeting on my phone and I could see the full screen, so
Okay.
I think that just, it's
And
gonna.
the third thing is, and Mr. Sharkey had a question about it, and having a background in broadcasting, things like this usually just don't kick off immediately. The audience builds as people are aware of it. I don't know if we put it out to the public that they can watch it here that much more. Perhaps we might even look at the idea of flyers for some other means of, maybe with our billing or something, that now you can go in and see it afterwards. It's archived, or you can see it live stream. So we can build our audience, because people just don't go checking when they don't know it's there. So, but I'm pleased that we're getting to that movement, and I hope we get the Skype in soon too. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the update. Good work. So, are we ready to roll out the video? Okay, Chief?
Right.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, City staff. I'm here today to present our monthly crime report and update for the Port Hueneme Police Department. For our Port Hueneme Police Department, because we're 6 months now into the year, this is our pretty much semi-annual report. It'll give us a pretty good purview of where our crime rate's going to land by the end of the year. And so what we have here for the month of June, we had a total of 35 total crime in our city, which was a reduction from the previous month. Something again of note is violent crime. We only had 3 violent crimes during the month of June, which were 2 of them were rapes, which were actually child molests, but because of the new definition, they're classified as rape, and along with a robbery, which everyone heard about, that occurred in Miranda Park during the middle of June. Again, the one thing that's really driving our crime rate right now is thefts, and those are thefts from vehicles, unlocked vehicles at that. 22 of the 26 larceny thefts that you see up there occurred from people leaving their vehicles unlocked. So if we could somehow get that number down, we're really going to make an impact on the crime rate in our community. So what I've decided to do is we're going to start an education and awareness campaign beginning in August. And even if it involves a door-to-door campaign, sending our explorers out and sending out flyers, we're going to make people aware of how they can have a direct impact on our crime rate here in the city of Port Hueneme. So as I've done traditionally in previous months, I compare it to last year's. Last year was one of our lowest years ever. So when we see and compare ourselves to last year, you're going to see a considerable, again, decline. And so when we compare last year, again, our numbers are still great. 59% reduction in violent crime, 19% reduction in property crime, which leaves us with a total crime reduction so far this year at the midway point at 25%.
Chief, if I might ask, so the 216 tabulation, is that just a 6-month period as you're comparing to the 6 months to date?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So last year we had 262 crimes at this point as compared to the 197 we've had thus far.
Okay, that's what thank you.
So told council at the last meeting that I would present statistics in regards to our 4th of July campaign, and so I have some numbers here to share with you. So what we did is we tabulated our statistics on firework calls from June 1st through July 6th. In 2016, we had 223 calls for service. This year, in 2017, we received 172 calls for service. The percentage number that you see up there next to each of the respective lines, 7.8%, that accounted for our total monthly calls for service during that same time period. So they almost account for about 10% of our calls for service during that time period, so essentially during the month of June. The biggest reduction of calls that we noticed were in our Surfside area, and that was probably due to our proactive efforts in terms of fireworks out on the beach area. So also, to summarize our statistics in terms of citations, in 2014 through 2016, as I'd mentioned in previous meetings, we had only issued 1 illegal fireworks citation. This past year, we issued 8. We also issued 7 citations for dogs on the sand on the 4th of July, along with 15 beach parking violations. And the beach parking violations, those are just citations issued by our officers, not by parking enforcement. So here are some of the signs that we had made and were put up as people drove into the respective lots. As you can see, we also had signs on the pay stations showing we prohibited fireworks. So many of you may have seen the electronic message boards as you were driving towards the beach or in Port Hueneme. We actually moved them around every day. So you may have seen them on Hemlock, Patterson, Ventura Road, Surfside. And so we had them out for 5 days, moving them each and every day. This is a picture I wanted to share with you. This was actually taken on the 4th of July when I did a foot patrol with Commander Albertson out on the pier. As you can see, both sides of the pier are absolutely jam-packed. There was probably at that time about 200 people out on the pier, if not more, with 50 plus of them actually fishing off of the pier. And you can actually see out on the sand all the people that are actually occupying the beach. So that really gives you a perspective of just how busy our 4th of July is, or how busy our beach is during the 4th of July. Unfortunately, to end the day at about 9 o'clock in the evening, we did have a homicide on the 4th of July in the area of Bolker and Hemlock. Fortunate for us, we had 16 police officers working that day that actually were able to immediately respond to the scene, which included myself and Commander Albertson. To give you an update on that, as many of you seen due to the press release, we have made an arrest in that case. Unfortunately, he was also a young male who was involved in this incident. So while as we had a 16-year-old male pass away, this is also going to affect the forever affect the life of another young male juvenile. So he has been taken into custody and is currently awaiting arraignment at the Ventura County Juvenile Detention Center, as he was 17 years old. Yes, sir.
Do you believe this was gang-related or just kind of a personal issue?
It was a personal issue that rose out of an earlier altercation and transpired over about a 1-hour period and subsequently resulted in this shooting. So in giving you kind of more updates about things that are happening in the community and with our department, I want to talk about our police explorers. They recently attended a 4-week summer academy. Here are some pictures I'd like to share with you. We started with 15 explorers in the academy. 10 graduated, 3 were actually injured during the academy but are still part of the program, and we actually only had 2 that actually fell out of the program as a result of participating in the academy. Here's me giving an inspection of all of our recruits on a hot Tuesday morning. Here's another picture of them. They got to, part of the academy is a number of field trips that they participate in. Here's them taking a tour of the air unit at the Camarillo Airport. They also visited the airport and visited the bomb squad facility out there and actually got to see live an explosion. Oops. And here is our group of kids along with the Oxnard cadets that graduated this past Saturday at the Pacifica High School in Oxnard. So now we have a total, official total of 19 kids in our program, and which is quite an increase from our previous 6. And so our program is growing, and we're looking forward to good things to come. Another program I wanted to share with you that many of you may not know about, but has actually been in existence since 2011. We are starting to reignite it, or kind of give it some momentum by re-advertising it, and that's our HEART program, which stands for Hueneme Assists Residents Together. We started or born this program at Hueneme Bay due to the senior community over there. And what it does is it allows officers to go in and actually check on our senior citizens that are living by themselves and don't have caretakers or don't have any type of family care, or their family actually lives out of town. It allows us to check up on them. It allows us to make sure they're not being taken advantage of. And it just allows us to kind of keep them company every once in a while. And not only do our officers participate in this, but our VIPs, our volunteers, assist with the program along with our explorers. And it's something that we handle in-house, as we don't want just any strangers visiting our senior citizen population. So this is a program that we are actually going out to Hueneme Bay on Tuesday, August 15th to enroll some additional senior citizens and make them aware of the program. And we'll also be out on Saturday, August 19th. Once we hit Hueneme Bay, we'll be going out to other communities in the city of Port Hueneme and offering this program. During the month of August, I kind of wanted to share with you what we have coming up, and that is a lot of you will see our grand jury response to the jail facility and department inspection that we had this past May, and what my response was to that. That'll need to get approved by City Council. We'll also be presenting a report on our vehicle fleet inventory, its current condition, and our request for additional vehicles, and as well as our August crime statistics. So I'm willing to entertain any questions at this point.
Questions of Chief?
If I can make a comment, yeah, thanks. So, Chief, thank you so much for continuing to provide this information to us in the community. It's great what you're doing. You know, you're building the team, maybe even the farm team, and it's wonderful to see crime rate continue to go down. We thank you so much for the support that you give the community.
Thank you. I have a lot of credit to be given to the men and women of the Port Hueneme Police Department who do a great job every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, yeah, as we look at our numbers, we're always dealing with small numbers here, so it's a little hard to spot a trend. Oxnard recently, their figures, if I saw them correctly, they had upticks in violent crimes, but their property crimes were somewhat lower now. They're dealing with some gang issues there, violent-wise. I just came back from driving across country, and everywhere you go, I mean, the big topic of discussion is opioid addiction, which one would expect would lead to increased property crimes. We're seeing, you know, pretty flat or reduction in property crimes here. Do you have any comments at all about opioid addiction in our community here, that you can tell us?
I recently came back from some training from Ventura County Mental Health. There is an epidemic going on in Ventura County. Oxnard is receiving the grunt of that with nearly 154, I believe it was, overdoses due to opioid and prescription medication during 2016. I believe Port Hueneme had 9. So there's a series of solutions in place to help deal with that. One of the most prevalent is the use of I believe it's called Noxaline.
Noxaline, yeah.
Which is kind of the new product instead of Narcan, and it's something that our officers can actually deploy out in the field instead of waiting for fire and paramedic personnel to arrive. So we will be participating in that program, and that should assist with dealing with those issues, but a lot of it has to do with awareness, and we will be kicking off another awareness campaign in terms of letting people know about the opioid addiction, as well as even letting our public know about the prescription drop-off bins that we have here in our lobby, which a lot of people don't know about. We're one of the few police departments in the county that actually have drop-off bins in our lobby, such as the Simi Valley Police Department, Ventura, and Camarillo Police Departments. So that's a service that we provide to our residents as well. So a great deal of us trying to do our part is making the public aware of this epidemic.
Yeah, the drop-off bins, that was something I fought for only just to keep them out of the wastewater system, and now, with everything that's going on, I mean, it's a way to keep prescription meds away from kids, too. If it's kicking around your medicine chest, then your kid's probably going to get a hold of it at some point. But I was just interested in if there was any correlation with we're seeing with property crimes at all on this, and from what I've seen of the statistics here in Oxnard and Port Hueneme, it doesn't seem like there is.
Well, there has been an increase in property crimes, I would say, and our property crime would actually be lower if it were had not been for the recent passing of the propositions here in California, releasing more of these types of offenders. Unfortunately, Oxnard has to deal with the big box stores that they have in their community, which shoplifts are considered a crime of petty theft, and we don't have those big box stores in our city. So they have that to contend with, as where if we could just let our residents know, lock your vehicles, that's really going to have a strong impact on our crime rate.
Yeah, sure is. I'll tell you a story about that too later, but thanks very much.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief Salinas. I'm impressed. It seems like the police department is getting proactive again. The Explorer Scouts is fantastic. And if you didn't have some war shots, I'd wonder about it, because the Marine Corps says, no pain, no gain. So hopefully you're doing your job on that. And back to the seniors program, Hueneme Bay really appreciates what you're doing and your officers are doing over there. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, with that, I do have a speaker card. Daniel Chavez, is that correct? Oh, there you are.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Port Hueneme residents and staff. So thank you, Chief, for the presentation. I wanted to come and speak before the council and the residents of Port Hueneme. Like the Chief already said, it was an unfortunate event that took place on 4th of July for Port Hueneme's first homicide. In the city of Oxnard, although it is the largest city in the county, we were halfway through the year and we already had 10 homicides. Because of my constant plea to the City Council of Oxnard to do more for our residents to try to address the violence in our communities, I took it upon myself to start setting up meetings with our faith-based organizations, law enforcement, school districts, and nonprofits that work with our youth and families. The reason for this is that I believe that we've all heard the saying, it takes a village, and ultimately this is what it's going to take. With decisions that are made on the state level, cities don't really have a say. And I'm referring to AB 109, Prop 47 and 57, where they kind of just reduce charges to criminals, and the ones that deal with it are law enforcement and our law-abiding residents. So I just wanted to address that and encourage anybody that's interested in working with me and to try to address the violence in our communities, because what happens in Oxnard does affect the city of Port Hueneme. We're so close, and this incident that took place on Volker and Hueneme, if that young man was literally across the street, it would have been Oxnard's. So we're so close to each other, and we need to work together in addressing this. I did want to make a couple of comments. The Explorers program, I think it's a great program. Unfortunately, I didn't know about it when I was a youth. I doubt I can join now at 27. So I think that's great that it increased from 6 to 19. Hopefully it gets promoted a lot more. I know Oxnard's is being promoted a lot more. And the HEART program, I have to see if that's even something that Oxnard has, because I think that's a great program to have, especially because right now, even though it's hot, where I work in the valley where it's over 100 degrees, it's always nice to come back home where it's about mid-70s. But it's important to look after our seniors. And I don't like to refer to them as seniors, but well-seasoned residents. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, I think we can move now, unless there's any other follow-up questions you might have for the chief. Let's move on then to city manager reports, starting with the contract with HDL.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As you know, we just recently became official in terms of our ordinance becoming effective on July 5th. We are now allowing several different types of cannabis-based businesses in Port Hueneme. That same day, July 5th, we began accepting applications from businesses that are interested in operating in Port Hueneme. Part of the whole process of making sure that we have the correct expertise on our side as we review these applications is the contract that we are recommending this evening. We're going to have Steve Kinney come up. Steve has been dealing most directly with HDL, and yes, this is the same HDL that's been around a long time, providing financial services consulting for cities and counties all throughout California. They've done our sales tax analysis and tracking for many years. About 2 years ago, as it was clear that California was moving toward legalized cannabis, they began a whole new division of HDL, helping cities from all perspectives. Cities that are super anti-cannabis, we don't want any cannabis of any kind, they will do consulting for those cities. But they're also doing consulting for a lot of cities and communities that want to allow some kind of legalized cannabis businesses. So they've got some good expertise. We intend to use them in a limited fashion, but Steve's going to talk a little bit about the details of the contract and the best news of all, which is the city does not have to pay for it. The fees will be covered through the applicants as part of the application process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Kinney.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Butler. Great introduction to the topic. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. We first started out contacting HDL some months ago when it was clear that there was a body of expertise located in that firm that we didn't share at the time. All of us involved with this project to date, I think you would fairly have to classify as rookies in the world of cannabis and cannabis regulation and the various processes that would have to be undertaken. So it was worthwhile to turn to the group that seemed to have general recognition as the experts in advising municipalities across the state. When we first approached HDL, they provided us with a proposal for a contract, which was really a soup to nuts provision of services, almost sort of a turnkey where all we need to do is sit back and watch them do their magic, and at the end of the day, there would be licenses issued appropriately in Port Hueneme. That seemed to be a little bit of a reach beyond what we actually needed. So we've gone back to HDL and narrowed the scope considerably from the first version of it to now really target on just those areas where we most need their help. And that's the content of the contract that's before you tonight. Without going into great detail, I would just classify the major areas where we look to them for assistance as being, well, one where they've already been helpful in helping staff create the application forms for the certificate, for the certificates for the license, and to help us structure the evaluation process. They will kind of touch lightly in the evaluation process, meaning we've asked them to, when we intake an application for a license and deem it to be complete with all the elements that are required, then we'll shoot that to HDL and just ask them to take a top-level review of it, a couple of hours. Just so that if there's anything that from their background and expertise jumps off the page as a factor or an element of that application that we ought to be aware of, be it something positive or be it a problem, that will get the benefit of that review. Beyond that, we'll do the heavy lifting of the grinding detail review of these applications. So that's one type of service. Secondly, cost recovery. As Mr. Butler mentioned, the expectation is that the fees charged for an application for the license are intended to cover the costs associated with having set up this whole program in the first place. So HDL had the spreadsheet and the knowledge to analyze our staff costs and related costs and translate that into an appropriate, a defensible fee number, which we need to bring to you for approval, and I think we'll be on track to do that at the next meeting. So more details on that fee to come, but again, the principle is once that fee is in place for anyone wanting to secure a license here, that in the aggregate, that amount of money will have paid for the city's staff time associated with the work. They will also undertake a fiscal revenue analysis leading toward a tax proposal, which means you've mentioned a couple times in discussions that maybe a tax is something that the city wants to look to in the future as a means of recovering revenue on a very structured basis. November of 2018 would be the next regular ballot time. So HDL will do some work to put together a rationale for what would be an appropriate tax level and the reasons why that would make sense, so that will be in front of you in time to consider, such that if you decide that's the way you want to go, it will be in time to get it onto the ballot as needed next year. And then the last area where their expertise is important is in the area of background checks. There are actually two kinds of background checks involved. One that HDL will be the lead agent on, so to speak, and then another that the chief is organized to undertake. The chief will head the effort to get what's called a live scan report back on all principals and employees of potential licensed businesses. And that live scan is a review through the federal system of FBI and Department of Justice. So that's one level of review, and then HDL has another more localized background check process that it goes through. So we'll ask HDL to do that as well. They just charge a standard $300 per head charge for that, and that of course gets charged on to the applicants. So those are the major areas where we think we need benefit from, no it's not, from HDL's expertise. Leading to the last, which is that once licenses are in place, there's a real important monitoring and follow-up component, which means we're not necessarily relying on the honor system for all revenues to be reported and all appropriate fees paid to the city and the rest. There will be actually quite an extensive audit system put in place to apply to all the licensees, involving quarterly inspections at the premises and then an annual review of all the finances at the end of year one of whatever the license time is. So we want HDL to do that for at least the first cycle, so that we can learn how to do it ourselves thereafter if it turns out that we've got actually the staff resources to do it. I'm really not sure at this point, but we want them to go through it once as a sort of a training mission at a minimum. So that is the last component of their package of services for us. So all that's encompassed in this proposed contract for the sum of $27,000 and $500. And again, to be recovered through fees, so no net cost to the general fund.
Questions? I do have a speaker card. Tom Dunn, did you want to address this particular item?
No, at the end of Rod's session.
I don't, you're talking about the budget now? I'm not clear what you're asking for.
At the end of his section, I'd like to say
Again, I'm not sure I understand.
the city manager's report.
Okay. So we'll give them that opportunity. All right. No questions, and at this point, we have a recommendation for approving the HDL contract. Do I hear a motion?
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so be it. Thanks. Okay, so next up, item B is dealing with our Community Enhancement Fund, and I think this is a follow-up to a question that Councilwoman Schnapp had on it, and so please take it away.
Right. Yeah, my understanding is that at the July 5th meeting, this topic came up, and Al Burrell answered a question related to the mechanics of how the Community Benefit Fund money gets to the city. And we wanted to just clarify that for the council, because it was a little bit, over time, was a little bit of a surprise to me, and I know that maybe some of the council members was a surprise to you as well. But there is some language. By the way, I handed this out to you at the beginning of the meeting, this one sheet, two-sided. This is the October 2015 agreement between the Harbor District and the city. And the language that you really have to zero in on is the district shall be responsible for creating the CBF, or Community Benefit Fund, as a separate interest-bearing account, and the district shall retain control over the CBF until such time as the projects are identified and approved or authorized as set forth in sections 10 and 11 of this agreement. And then here's the key phrase: pre-funded by the city, except for expenses that are more practically paid directly by the district from the CBF fund and presented to the district for reimbursement. So a little bit of a shocker for me. I had read the agreement, sections of the agreement, several times as we were preparing the list of projects, but I had never zeroed in on that line or that phrase. And Mayor Figg confirmed that he was involved in some of those negotiations. This language does date back to that time when the agreement was being finalized. So it's basically like a reimbursement concept where we, except for projects that the district and city agree to have the district pay directly, maybe on an invoice for, something that we've agreed to, we are to front the money. We spend the money first, and almost like a grant reimbursement, we then submit our documentation to the Harbor District, and they reimburse us for those funds. I've had first of all, let me just back up and say that in no way is the Harbor District questioning or challenging any of the projects that we put forward to them. I put together the letter myself shortly after the council agreed to those projects. I hand-delivered it to them. I've had multiple conversations with Kristen, Andrew, and Austin, and they have assured me that there's no issue with what we have recommended as far as our projects. It's just that they were aware of this reimbursement-based approach, and I was not. So I will also say that I don't get the sense that they're trying to create any drama or hassles for us at all with this approach. I think it was just all along, and some of us like me didn't realize that. So what we'll do, I know Al Burrell has already met at least once with Austin Yang in their finance division, and they're already working on the mechanics of how this will work, because I know there are, we want to get moving on these projects, including the funding that's going to some outside organizations like the Historical Museum and the Chamber. So I think it's very workable, very doable, and I'll be kind of keeping my hands in that and those discussions with between Al and Austin and Andrew to make sure that we come up with an agreement that works for everyone. And I think Al has indicated to me that now that it's clear that this language is in the agreement, he can find a way to make that work and get some of this stuff moving. So that's what we found out. Hopefully that answers the question. And if there are any questions that you have, I'll try to field those now.
All right, as I'm reading this now, the first year's deposit is to be spent at the sole discretion of the city. The timelines delineated here speak to the districts depositing the funds. They don't say anything about how long it takes the city to spend that money, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yes.
We do not have to actually expend the money in 1 year.
My understanding is that there was a time clock for us in getting our projects submitted, which we did meet. That's why we kept putting it on the agenda, 2 or 3 times. But now that the Harbor District has received that information from us, and this is confirmed recently by Kristen, based on her review, there is not particularly a time clock ticking by which we have to spend those funds.
Right, that's what I understood, and then I don't really find that language in here anyway. That we have delineated projects on which we'd like to spend this money, and I assume we can change our mind if we want to and move that money around, but we do not actually have to spend the money in 1 year. We can take that particular portion of the funds is already deposited, and it is there for the use at the sole discretion of the city.
That's my understanding, because we met the deadline of submitting our list of projects.
That's okay. That's what I understand. All right. That's what it seems to say, and that's why we have lawyers, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Butler, for the clarification here. So following that, in that sentence, pre-funded by the city, in parentheses, except for expenses that are more practically paid directly by the district from this fund, how are we going to identify those? Is that going to be something that you and Mr. Burrell are going to be looking at and seeking then that the Harbor District would just pay for some of these expenses outright instead of reimbursement?
Right. And I can't really think of a good example right now, but if there's some case down the road where it just makes more practical sense for the district to cut a check to, whatever the vendor is, rather than going through this reimbursement process with the city, this allows that to happen. And I think Al and Austin are far enough along yet to know, if they've identified situations where that would be the case, but the language is there to allow that if it makes sense down the road.
When that happens and these, the funds are identified or the detail of where these would go, could you come back and just report to us?
Sure.
Whether it's reporting here or through another mechanism?
Yeah, I know one of the things I really harped on Al about is we've got to track this money carefully because it's of interest to the city, the harbor, and the public. So I think what he intends to do is to set up little project accounts for each one of these projects that the council identified and track that carefully so we can report to the council regularly on that.
Super, because I know that when we went through the budget last time and he was presenting it, as I wanted to ask specifically, or I asked specifically where some of those expenses were going, and I now see the detail of that question. So thank you for clarifying this for us, and then we'll just, stay tuned to what then comes from their direct payment and our reimbursement. Thank you.
All right. Oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, and I believe that with this new fiscal year that we're entering into now, all expenditures of these funds are going to be with communication with us here on the city council and in conjunction with the people over at the port. We will be the ones who will be then discussing how something should be paid and why it would be logical for either this port to reimburse us or for the port just to pay for something directly. And we'll work that out in collaboration with the port. It's pretty simple.
Makes sense.
Okay, then. So let's move on to item C, update on the strategic action plan.
Right. So as the council is aware, and I think most of the public knows, back on March 20th, the City Council approved a comprehensive strategic action plan. We've been providing monthly updates for the past couple of months. What I'm going to do, rather than try, I mean, the full report will always be there, rather than try to go through every single item, is highlight a few each month where there's been significant progress. And what I've tried to do to these written reports is over on that right-hand column, the notes section, provide a quick update on where things stand. It just doesn't leave you a whole lot of space to go into detail. So I would highlight, I know there's a lot of interest in it's called different things, Citizens Advisory Committee. That will be coming forward for council review with a specific recommendation of how we would go about that. Most likely at your August 21st meeting, be one of the two meetings in August, and probably the August 21st. You heard from Mr. Villafana earlier on the capital improvement plan at Hueneme Beach, and there are really two aspects to that. As the mayor pointed out, there is kind of the short-term, how do we clean up and maintain what's there now aspect of it, but there's also what's our vision for the beach park in the future in terms of upgrading infrastructure. So that's a major, at least that latter part of it is a major project that's still ongoing. We've talked quite a bit at council meetings about the janitorial services at beach restrooms, the Hueneme Beach restrooms, and Mr. Villafana reported on that today. In addition to what he showed in the photos, we've also upgraded the frequency of janitorial services, which was part of this item promoting coastal amenities. So we are doing basic cleaning of the restrooms more frequently than we were before as well. We have currently underway with a firm called PFM, Public Financial Management Incorporated, that multi-year baseline financial model that's talked about in its number 2 under cultivating a high-performing organization. And that will kind of take that 5-year spreadsheet that Al has presented several times, but really make it much more sophisticated, detailed, give us the ability to do projections out into the future in a more detailed way than the spreadsheet that you've seen before allows us. So that's, part of that $15,000 that was budgeted is being used for that project. Carmen has received 2 proposals from, I think, well-qualified firms on item number 3 of the high-performance organization category, which is the assessment of our risk management program. And that's kind of taking a look at all of our insurance coverages, liability, risk management, the services that we currently get from California Joint Powers Insurance Authority. And I think both of those firms that have presented proposals are competent, do a good job. We're kind of discussing and haggling a little bit with them on the budget for the project. But either way, either one that we select will be able to do a good job for us. And we're expecting to have that awarded, I would say, in the next 30 days. You heard tonight from, Steve Hickox on the water rate study, and it sounds like they're getting very close to being able to present to us on that important document. You also heard about the City Council digital capability and some of the things that were discussed as part of that, and that's the enhancing community involvement section of the action plan. And we do expect that we'll be able to do everything that Carmen mentioned tonight within that $7,500 budget that was allocated. Under creating a sustainable financial future, one of the major items was the exploration of redevelopment or reuse options for cities' real estate, for the city's real estate assets. And of course, some of that was talked about in closed session tonight, but the bottom line is we're moving forward on looking at all of those city-owned assets, real estate in particular, and trying to figure out a way of, using those assets to generate revenue for the city. And we'll be coming back in closed session to the council on the specifics of those things over the next few months, and eventually, if it's done in closed session, will have to be reported out into closed session so the community will be aware of the decisions that are being made. And then one major item I know will bring a smile to the face of both the mayor and Councilmember Sharkey are we've pretty much decided, not 100%, but we're close to deciding on a consulting firm to do the community survey related to potential tax measures for the November 18 ballot. It will not be just a tax survey. It will be a community attitudes survey, very similar from what I've heard. In fact, it may even be the same firm that did this prior to the November 2008 half-cent sales tax that the voters in Port Hueneme approved. So it's, it is broad-based, ask a lot of questions about how people are feeling about the community, what their priorities are, but it will give us the information we need in terms of measures and what would be most likely to be successful here. So again, we've narrowed it down to a firm that I think there's a polling firm and then more of a strategy consulting firm that I think are, if not the best in California, probably in the top 3, and do these campaigns all over the state and have been very successful. So that will be coming forward to the council for award very soon as well. And those are the things that I wanted to highlight tonight there. That doesn't mean that those are the only areas where there's been progress, but I don't know that we have the time or the desire tonight to go through every single one of them. So I can answer any questions that the council may have, but I think we're moving forward on a lot of it.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Questions? No, thank you very much for that update. I did have a question regarding REACH. Now, because that's a very important tool for fundraising purposes and kind of promoting our upswell in volunteerism. Is that to be done as part of the activation of a Citizens Advisory Committee? Are we looking at the same time frame, which would be the end of August?
We could partially at least tie it into the Community Advisory Committee concept. I know there has been some real progress made on the REACH project in that Mr. Green is helping us to update the bylaws and all the paperwork surrounding REACH to make sure that it's all the most up-to-date in terms of the legal structure, and also give us some options in terms of how to make that body more effective. And it seems like am I missing something on REACH that we have done aside from Charlie's involvement now? Okay. So, yeah, but we will talk about that. Does it make sense to fold tightly into the Community Advisory Committee concept, or do we want to keep REACH, a little more separate from that?
Okay, then. All right, so, you're pointing at somebody. Somebody wanted to speak?
John wanted to talk.
No, that's what I'm trying to understand. He still has one more item, which is the budget. I don't know what your thoughts were. It may be a long time, so would you care to speak now?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. And I've come to put a feather in your caps. And to the city manager, the mayor, the city council, and all the department heads. Middle of last year, we had a lot of citizens coming up here with complaints. And the problem was a lot of those complaints, if not most of them, were either slowly taken care of or not taken care of by the city council. And when City Manager Butler arrived, I wanted him to start talking about every meeting what had been said at the previous meeting that needed to be done. So we had a good follow-up on that. And he did that. And then the last meeting or two, I realized, wait a minute, we haven't done that in months. And then I realized that nobody had been up here complaining. And so then I figured out that because of the work that everybody in the city and the department heads have done, when Rod started doing Citizens Forum on Hello Port Hueneme, that's where all the calls and emails came to him and me, and we addressed those, and the city responded immediately in very quick fashion, the department heads and everybody. And I think it's been about 4 months we've done that we've had about 12 issues that we have either solved, answered, or they're in the process of being done. And so I wanted to thank all of you for doing that, and the citizens for seeing that they had a voice that they could respond to and get quick action. So thank all of you very much.
Thank you, Mr. All right, so that now brings us to the budget.
Right. Mayor and members of the council, in a moment of foolish optimism, probably 3 or 4 months ago, I approved Al Burrell's vacation request for mid-July. Of course, we were thinking, oh, the budget will be adopted by then, everything will be hunky-dory. So the bottom line is Al is gone. Al is not with us tonight. You have Carmen and me to kind of walk you through, hopefully, the answers to some of the questions that came up on July 5th. I don't think we're going to get completely there in terms of getting council members' questions answered, but we want to at least take some time tonight to address some of the things that came up on the 5th. I'm going to start out, and then Carmen's going to provide some additional information in response to those July 5th questions as well. Just to kind of walk you through the written staff report that we put together. We started on page 1 with kind of a timeline of where we've been in the budget process to date. Our hope is that we'll be at a point at the next regular meeting, August 7th, to where the council could consider adoption of the budget at that time. And of course, you approved, at the July 5th meeting, you approved a continuing resolution that allows us to operate at last year's appropriation levels during this time while we're waiting for the budget to be finalized. There was some discussion about reserve funds, I believe, at the July 5th meeting, and what we got from Mr. Burrell before he left, you'll see on page 102 of 107, which is kind of a restating of the general fund reserves, the blueprint, kind of halfway down, table 3, basically. So that addresses the issue of where we stand currently with general fund reserves. I believe that the mayor and possibly other members of the council wanted some additional information on our enterprise fund reserves and the non-general fund portion of our funds. And that's something that we'll have to have Al provide. I don't think we currently have a policy, an established policy for those enterprise fund reserves, and that's something that you may want to direct us to do, either tonight or at a later date. Put together what I would call a fiscal policy plan for those funds, which would include reserve levels, desired reserve levels. But right now, I don't think we have that. And you'll recall that the council did recently, within the last 2 or 3 months, you approved a change to the basic general fund reserve policy from the old benchmark of 50% of annual expenses or annual budget expenses down to 25%. And what I've asked Al to do is to come back and formalize that in the form of a resolution that the council can approve. The council voted on it, it was approved, but I don't believe that there was actually a resolution approved at that time. We provided some information on the strategic action plan, funding of those items, those specific items that were allocated dollars and what the funding sources were. Something that you're going to be seeing a lot of over the next couple of months are these charts that show potential revenue sources. Table 10 is revenue sources that would require voter approval. Table 11 is a table that shows new revenue sources that would not necessarily require voter approval. I think the message in that is that if you combine the two, the voter approval required and the voter approval not required, talking about over $5 million of potential ongoing general fund revenue. Now, I doubt that we're going to do every single item on that list, but we've got, in my opinion, we have about $1 million to $1.5 million structural deficit in the general fund right now, depending on how much you believe we should be investing in facilities maintenance and major infrastructure projects every year. So I think the message is there are plenty of options there to solve that $1.5 million problem. We just need to get focus and direction from the council over the next couple of months, and that survey that I talked about will help us with that, because it'll give us a sense of what might be achievable from the voters of this community as far as things that do have to go to the voters. A couple things on here that aren't even, or a couple options we have that aren't not even listed on these charts. For example, the refunding of the bonds that will be coming back to you probably August 7th. That would generate for at least 5 or 6 years that $65,000 in savings, maybe a little bit more depending on what interest rate we actually settle in at. And then we provide some information on cost containment options. Some of those are kind of the golden oldies that have been talked about before, and we're not necessarily recommending those. So when you see the lifeguard program, we're not here tonight that we should eliminate the lifeguard program. This was kind of just a rehash of some of the things, that discretionary funding items that have been talked about over the years. The question did come up, I saw it either in an email or in the recap of the July 5 meeting. I believe it was the mayor, but it may have been another council member as well. How will the HUD settlement be reflected in the budget? And of course, I have to be careful about what I say on this, because the HUD settlement has not gone official or gone public yet, but it will show up basically as less money in our unassigned general fund reserve, because those funds will be transferred from the unassigned general fund reserve to our own Port Hueneme Housing Authority funds. And honestly, that transfer has already taken place. So we're getting very close, I think, to having HUD give us the green light to go public with that. But that's the way it'll be reflected in the budget is, it will show up having less unassigned general fund reserves. Now, the mayor had asked a series of questions about SPA, Surplus Property Authority. Mr. Burrell, before he left, got me probably 70 to 75% of those answers. I can either walk through that with you verbally tonight, or we can present that. What I'd like to do is take the mayor's sheet of questions, and if you have a Word version of that we can just write the answer to each item on, that might be the easiest way to deal with it at the August 7th meeting. But we can also go through it tonight if but he had most of it. There were a few things that were legal questions more lines of needing Charlie's advice and recommendations. So I'll be working with Charlie on that as well. But he did have, Al did get us, I'd say again, at least 70 to 75% of those detailed answers. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carmen to address some of the other specific items that came out of the July 5th meeting. Just the overview, and I think it probably came out in Al's presentation on the 5th. We'll be recommending a general fund budget that does have deficits in both years, year 1 and year 2, but with the understanding that by the end of this calendar year, end of 2017, we will have a specific game plan for how we solve that. So it's not, we're going to be spending, deficit spending into it, and let's just whistle past the graveyard and do nothing about it. That's going to be, we're acknowledging the reality of where we are now, but we're also, and that was the purpose of including those tables that show the revenue options and some of the cost containment options. We have some specific ideas and plans that will more than solve that general fund shortfall. With that, we'll turn it over to Carmen.
So over the course of the several budget meetings and other meetings we've had, there's some personnel costs and staffing level questions that have come up. This is going to be a very brief presentation of some of those responses back to the council that have been looming out there now for some time. And I say it's a brief presentation because there's still some unanswered questions, as Mr. Butler mentioned. We're still working with finance and to trying to get a wrap on all the questions that are still outstanding. So it's still a work in progress. Hopefully by the next meeting we'll have wrapped up all the questions and are moving forward with budget approval. This very brief presentation is intended to provide a detailed schedule of employee total compensation as reported to the State Controller's Office. It is a public website, so that information is on there. This was a question that did come up by the City Council at a past meeting, if we could bring back all employee total compensation report. Also, we'll discuss the presentation will also bring you in employee compensation comparisons. We'll do some average of total compensation comparisons as we compare the city to other agencies in our county. We'll also discuss benefit concessions. There was a question by a council member regarding the concessions that have been given by different labor groups, including the City Council in the past years, and then what did that mean per employee group. The last item, unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to get to, but it's still an important factor that we should consider. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to present any information on that. The first one is the State Controller's report. I'm going to ask the clerk to put up the word that be able to see the picture a little bit better. Are you able to zoom it by maybe the top 10 to 15 groups? Okay. And then maybe move it over a little bit. If you click into right at the bottom of that toolbar way on the right, Michelle, you see that little triangle up at the toolbar? Maybe you can collapse that toolbar. Keep going to the right. Yeah. Okay. So the 2016 State Controller's Report was not available. What you're seeing here is a 2015 report. This basically, again, is a public document available to the public at publicpay.ca.gov. What this shows is total compensation for Port Hueneme employees. Total compensation includes cash salaries, Cash dollars include items such as your regular pay. It includes added class pay, interim pay, and other cash benefits that are paid to the employee, such as overtime pay. The other part of this formula is the benefits section of it, which includes health benefits, the cost of the employer cost health benefits, as well as other employer contributions to pension, both in defined benefit like the PERS plan and defined contributions like a 457 and a 401k plan. The column on the right includes, and we'll post this slide, and unfortunately we ran out of time at the end of next week, so we'll post these slides for the public to view and also for the City Council to get a copy of. But in this graph, or this chart actually shows all employees. On the right side, you'll see employees that are earning $100,000. Again, this is total compensation, including pay and benefits. And then on the left side and on the right side, you see employees earning less than $100,000. So I'll have this city clerk maybe move that around so you can see both sides of it. And of course, it goes down a little lower. Any questions on that slide? Or we can come back to it too if you'd like. Okay, so we'll toggle back to the PowerPoint. The slide on the left shows a total average employee compensation, Port Hueneme being the red mark. Based on the 2015 State Controller's Report, the comparison there on Table 1 shows Port Hueneme compared to other cities and the county employees to show the average total compensation. As you can see, Port Hueneme is the average total compensation salaries and benefits is approximately $76,000. That's the average based on number of employees. Based on this graph here, you'll see that City of Port Hueneme is sitting fourth as far as total compensation when compared to other cities, with Simi coming in on top with about $102,000 total compensation average per employee. The chart on the right shows total average employee compensation when you compare Port Hueneme departments. Again, this is 2015 data from the State Controller's Report. You'll see there that administration, which includes various various employees in, the city administration department sits at the top. That's where you'll find the city manager, deputy city manager, and other classifications. Right next to that would be police department. So again, the two top rating departments are administration and police department. The next graph shows when we look at Ventura County enforcement agencies, this had been an item that come up earlier this year, was as we take the comparison of our law enforcement agencies. As you see, Port Hueneme is sitting in the middle when compared to other agencies in the county. The chart on the right shows the population by city. I didn't do the calculation on forgetting the term again, but basically there you see the population for every city. Again, that's information that was taken out of the State Controller's Report. The final item I have for you tonight is looking at personnel reductions and savings in form of concessions. As you see here, every labor group was listed separately. For example, on the top line, you have City Council. The concession between the years of 2015 and 2017 was $56,700. The number of employees are 5, and the reduction per employee is $11,340. Employee concessions for this group mainly were in Social Security, so City Council gave up their Social Security and Medicare benefit, also any health benefit and a contribution made by the employer to a deferred compensation plan. That varies by group. For example, in the management professional group, the concession there is equivalent to the Social Security and Medicare give back and also management benefit. And so the other groups, similarly, the majority of that number is going to be the Social Security and Medicare give back, where the employees began to pay their own Social Security and Medicare. Again, you see the numbers of employees in each group and then the reduction per employee per group.
I had a question, Mr. Mayor, if I can ask. So in the line for city council, I know that happened a couple of years ago, and so you were saying primarily that was Social Security that city council was then starting to pay?
Right, that is Social Security Medicare contribution that now the employee pays, or at this point, the council member pays. Also included reduction of health, the elimination of the health benefit, as well as contribution to 457, a 401k plan.
So the health benefit really only affected a few, it didn't affect all five?
Right.
And then the contribution affected everybody?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Fig. Thank you, Mrs. Nichols. I appreciate this. It kind of gives me the indication that our alleged Y rating that we had a while back is somewhat off when we're higher than most of the other cities of equal size and not far behind the other ones. And then could you flip back that slide, please?
The concession slide, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
To where you were, just keep
Okay.
going.
Let me,
Months. A little bit more. One more, I think.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
Um,
One more.
There was one more, yes.
Okay.
There we go. The management reduction, 17 manager and professionals took a reduction of $10,598. But on the backside, we didn't mention, from what I understood, there was kind of a sneaky backdoor raise for some of those where some of the other employees didn't happen. I feel very uncomfortable with that. I think it's putting out kind of false information.
There's no sneaky backdoor raises given to employees. Raises are either given for merit, meaning that an employee has received a satisfactory evaluation and has room within their classification to receive an increase. Those raises are approved by the city manager. An employee may also get an out-of-class pay. So, for example, if a police officer who sits in a, let's say, a senior officer position, but a temporary sergeant position comes up, he will receive an out-of-class pay. That's approved recommended by the department head, and again approved by the city manager. You'll also get interim pays. So if an employee sits in a position, an interim position, an employee may also get an increase that way. Other than that, there are no sneaky backdoor deals
I
happening.
kind of remember that when we made this change over last year, that even though the management professional was, I think, there was 8 or 10, there was a raise in there. They gave away so much, but then they were compensated on the backside as far as total salary. And I wasn't happy with it at that time, and I don't think this, no reflection to, a negative reflection to you, but this is kind of presenting a false image.
Okay, I'm not going to debate your opinion.
I'm not really sure what I'm understanding you saying. I think perhaps we just conclude the discussion at this point. I don't think it's appropriate to make those kinds of statements without having the facts to support testing.
Right.
And I apologize to our deputy city manager for that exchange.
Right, so tonight's really just another opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have. We anticipate coming back to the council on August 7th with any remaining answers, including all of the SPA detailed responses that the mayor has asked about. And I would encourage the council to take advantage of this break that we've got. The way the calendar falls, it's a 3-week break between council meetings. I know Councilmember Berg has come in and met with departments over the last couple of weeks, getting a little more detail on their budgets and what's in the proposal for the next 2 years. We stand ready to do that for any of you in an effort to raise your comfort level with what's being proposed. I know this whole concept of going to a 2-year budget is maybe not the first time in Port Huenemi's history, but it's the first time in a long time that we've done a 2-year budget. So that's new.
Yeah, Rod, if I may, please. He's correct. Earlier last week, I had the opportunity and took that opportunity to not just meet with our CFO, which gave me a 30,000-foot view of the budget, and it's quite unintelligible and really hard to find out what's going on. I worked with our deputy city manager, Carmen Nichols, to sit down for approximately 3 hours with the various department heads and go over every department budget and where they were spending money and not spending money and where they were taking advantage of new resources. We are still undermanned in all departments, but for the first time I began to see a light at the end of the tunnel, as one might say. It looked like, for me at least, the beginning of the end of all this. And it was I was able to also discuss the budget with Mr. Villafana. Steve Hickox went through public works with them in detail, looked at all the personnel hiring, looked at some of the projects that they were, for example, what they reported on tonight. But they're going to end up in that department in the black for the next 2 years on the 2-year budgets that they're making. They're excited about the budget and some of the things they're doing. And it looks like this might work. And it's our job to help find more sources of revenue and help to balance this out. But I was really quite impressed with all this. I even spoke with Gabby Basua with the Housing Authority, with her budget. I discussed this with Tony Stewart in Community Development. We laid out his budget and where he was going, some of his ideas and my ideas as well. Surprisingly, Tony is after some of these businesses that are announcing opening soon. He's approaching them. What do you mean by soon? How soon can this happen? And there's an attitude change amongst the staff out there, and they're showing leadership. And they're taking control of their own individual budgets, and so this is a good sign. And I'm pretty pleased with that. We're not out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination, but we are beginning to see the results of having the right people in the right place. And so it was a good meeting. I would recommend it for all of us to be able to do this. Please.
Other thoughts, questions? Is there any particular direction that you're looking for right now?
Just really any additional questions that did not come up July 5th or that you haven't shared with us over the last couple of weeks, or anything in particular that you'd like to see in the presentation on August 7th. I missed, so I don't know exactly what was in Al's. I saw an early version of his PowerPoint, but anything like that will be helpful for us as we try to bring this thing home over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so for instance, Table 10, Table 11, you're not looking for us to sign on any particular revenue alternative, but rather that's going to shake out through the process that you're suggesting by way of whether it's community surveys or financial analysis. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then what about in terms of cost savings? Do you need direction on that? Because all we have here is just a table showing what potential savings are. But
Yeah.
is this something you're looking for this evening?
Are there any things on that list? I'm assuming eliminating the lifeguards program is not on the table. Anything on that list that's there tonight that you would also like to eliminate from consideration? That might.
Well, I'd like to eliminate them all. I don't think that that's in the cards. And I'll address our friends from the library. You know, I've been very critical about our subsidy to the library. And it's not the library that I'm critical of, it's the equal treatment of all of our agencies. And a couple of years ago, we terminated a crossing guard program, and we argued that it's because the school should be doing that, and moreover, they're getting a lion's share of our former RDA money. Well, the same could be said of the library, animal control services, I could go on. And so it's more of a philosophical issue of equal treatment is really what it comes down to. And tonight I made a big issue about all of a sudden we're going to gift our taxing entities with a $300,000 to refund our bonds. And I'm troubled by how these services are being rendered to us and the cost for us and what are we getting in return? And so I'm not going to recommend the library be cut, but I think it's important you understand the dilemma. And I'm looking for reach, and that was another question I had, is that the sooner we can retool that organization and make it more functional, the sooner that we can start generating revenues to backfill what we're subsidizing from our general fund. And that was specifically a task in the strategic action plan. REACH was to focus in on the museum as well as the library. Those were the two cost centers that we were hoping to be able to backfill, replace our general fund subsidy.
Right.
So your message was received, but it wasn't because the library isn't a valued service to this community. All of our services are valued, and I'm just looking for equal treatment. So, enough said. So I don't have any objections to keep that list in place. The lifeguards, I'm hoping, will be something that will be embodied in a police or a public safety parcel tax. So I'm hoping that that will be the outcome. But we've cut our community center programs to, what else is left? I don't know. I didn't get an answer on what our subsidies are for the museum and for the chamber. It just says variable. I don't know what that means. But I think we're at a point where there's not a hell of a lot more to be cut without really hurting us really bad. So that's my 2 cents worth.
And I agree with your point of view about the taxes and the refinancing of the bond debt that we're talking about. What do we get out of it? $63,000 a year. And if we don't do it, we don't get that. Now, yes, other people are going to make even more. And but we didn't go into this, we shouldn't be going into this thinking how we can help other people right now. We should think about how we can help ourselves. If we don't do it, we're not going to get it.
Well, but that is what I'm thinking. Let's help ourselves, because there's a lot at stake for those other agencies.
Of course.
And if we can increase the benefit back to the city, particularly when we have these problems with accountability, and the animal control services is a real problem.
I agree with you on that.
Okay.
But by approaching them and asking them for some of that money to give it back to us, please, keep in mind you might not get the response you want.
Oh, absolutely true. And then this council will have to decide, are we going to gift those agencies and go ahead and do a bond refunding?
And I would vote yes in a heartbeat.
Okay. I mean, I understand your position. I absolutely
we need that
understand.
$63,000. And if it's better than, as my grandma used to say, a sharp stick in the eye. Take what you can get.
Okay.
But let's try and negotiate with them. Maybe they'll give us back some money.
But your statement that you just made could have compromised our negotiating position. Do you realize?
Well, I'm going to be one who will always try and partner with them in
Okay.
any event. And if we can collaborate maybe someday that goodwill will be returned.
I'm going to meet your grandma someday. I guess you don't need anything beyond what we talked about. I did have a lot of questions regarding SPA because we've got money parked over there, and the question is, can it be repositioned in some fashion? But I don't want to jeopardize the successor agency's receipt of whatever residual tax increment funds we have available to us. But that's an important question. I don't know how it'll play out and fix the budget or whatever, but yeah, that is something that I'd be very interested. I'm also a little concerned that we had a baseline budget supposedly back in, whatever the heck, a couple of months ago. And then we got a more detailed update, okay? And it didn't really tell me the story about how many new full-time positions are we gonna have, okay? We ought to combine those, the baseline and the update, and I would like to have a more provocative discussion about the necessity of those positions. Because when we're in a deficit position, I'm not sure that it's appropriate that we, particularly when past budgets have probably taken advantage of those vacancies and counted it as savings.
Right.
Okay? So here we are now, forget the savings we did 2 years ago, now we're gonna, we're gonna catch up.
Yeah.
So I think that those are two important issues to me, is a better accounting of our staffing and the necessity for additional positions.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, if I will, I don't want to leave, Mr. completely on the point of the knife because.
Oh, I didn't think I was doing it.
No.
It was a stick of the eye.
I'm not talking about your comments. I'm talking about just a couple of things that were said over the evening about REACH. To a great extent, the reason we haven't progressed any further than we have on REACH is because I just haven't had the time. And I wanted to lay that on the table because.
That wasn't the point of my question.
It's all right. If I don't throw myself on my sword at least once a night, it's not a good night, So I wanted to make that point, and it's not for lack of wanting to get to it, but I'm actually working a lot harder than I thought I was going to, so.
Really?
Welcome aboard.
That's a surprise.
No.
What was your prior attorney doing?
Let's don't go.
We don't want to go there.
What I will say is that, we've tasked you, when I say you, it's collectively staffed with a lot of things. But by and large, our expectations have been or are being fulfilled. And so no criticism was intended on my part. I know everybody's working at 110%. I mean, there's no question in my mind. But I have a short shelf life, like other council members, and I'm anxious to solve a lot of these problems now. And so I'm sorry if it translates to unreal expectations on my part, because that's certainly not my intent.
I want everybody to hear what I have to say. Part of the change, I think, and I don't have the historical perspective on it, but my estimation is that part of the change that that Mr. Berg was speaking of comes from the urgency of the council. I think the council has been, everybody on this board has been urgent about the need to change, and mostly in a positive way, so that staff takes that away as, okay, that's our mission, let's go get it done. And so I'm not criticizing at all. To the extent that anybody was wondering why we haven't gotten to REACH sooner, I wanted to say it's me, but that's because I've been doing other things at the request of the council or Mr. Butler, and they've all been good, positive things. I've been very excited to be a part of it, so thank you.
Shall we leave that on a positive note and task staff to return? I guess we're looking at August 7th, is that correct? Okay. We normally have a dark month, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
Okay. So let me get back to my agenda. So that just brings us to, if council still have things that they want to talk about, now's the time.
So I do have 12A,
12A.
right?
Well, yes, that, you can start it
wanna
off.
start
if you- Sure.
Okay, all right. So we had a really good meeting with OHD and Kristen, and Commissioner Herrera was able to join both Mr. City Manager and Deputy City Manager and myself. And we talked about how they started off with their sister port relationship of Ensenada. Now, I guess a lot of people may have thought that that was a sister city relationship because they hear Port Hueneme, but they don't realize it's Port of Hueneme versus the city. So anyways, they gave us a little bit of history that they met at one of these, international port meetings, and then realized, hey, they could possibly be something about working together. So both ports actually commissioned a joint study to see if there was any business opportunities for them to do. Maybe it's called short haul. I forget what the term is, but it came up saying that that could be a project to work together on. And the interesting thing is that if we look at regional perspective with where Ensenada sits in Baja California and where Port Hueneme sits up here in Northern California, there are some regional synergies more than just port-related businesses. We realize that Stellar Biotech has actually found that the mollusk that they find here offshore only grows in another part of the country or another part of the world, and guess where it is? In Baja California, close to Ensenada. So they've actually identified then a new facility and new opportunity for them to expand their program, but it's just because they find those similarities. Also, if we take that 30,000 foot level, we realized then pretty close to Ensenada is a wine industry called Valle de Guadalupe that I had heard from, many involved in the wine industry. And it's a booming business out there. And so if we look at regional perspective, then we have more of the, the wineries in Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County. So it becomes a broader story. And then when we take a look at cruise ships, I know that Dave Lowe had his radio cruise lines going out from here down south. And of course, Ensenada has, that's like the port that everybody stops at. So with all of that, we realized that, Ensenada would be the first, probably more to come. But for the Sister City program, we feel pretty confident that that could be something we launch into in the short term. The Sister Cities International Group suggested there's a couple of steps that we take. Perhaps there's a letter that we have the mayor sign that would be a letter of interest that goes to the mayor of Ensenada, and so there's some more formal application, and then there's the stuff that we can deal with here. There could be a group from this dais, maybe I and another city council member and a couple of other people, then go and do a visit with the folks at Ensenada. And then we can work out then the sister city agreements and make it a little bit more formal. Ensenada already has a sister city. One of the beaches, I believe it might be Redondo Beach, is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Sounds like, yeah. That has been very inactive in the last couple of years, even to the point of no phone call has been returned by wherever the phone is going to within that city for months. So we realized that it could just be an opportunity for us to step in and have a very active kind of sister city relationship. And I believe that this too would turn the page for the Port of Hueneme with us getting engaged with Ensenada in this way that they could then step up and see some other synergies that could be developed from their business standpoint. So, so with that said, that's kind of the next steps that we'll take. It's also been recommended to us that we develop a sister city committee so that if not in a year, within a couple of years, it hands off and becomes its own organization. And many of the other sister cities around us have that kind of, organization aspect to them, like the sister cities of Oxnard, it's separate from the city. Sister cities of Santa Barbara, it's separate from the city of Santa Barbara. So, there's that kind of level that they're swaying us to develop. And then the next sister city quarterly meeting for this Southern California area or chapter is going to be held mid-August in Dana-Port. So, we're always welcome to attend those meetings and talk to others that have this kind of language within their business. So that's an update. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The amount that we had identified for this was $5,500, and so it seems that once we start these steps, we'll start spending some of that money. Any questions? Pardon? And then we can get reimbursed.
Hurry up and spend.
Yeah. I also had something else, not part of this, but and he's gone, and so I wanted to recognize Steve Gama and what he's done at our the monument for the Alaska Air crash. He gets folks out there, if not every Saturday, very frequently, and they're using push brooms and cleaning it up and really, making it look nice. And so I kudos to him. But unfortunately, he's not here, so hopefully he's watching this at home. Thanks, Steve. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This past weekend, I attended the memorial services for Elaine Garber, who passed away a couple of months ago. Elaine was served on the Hueneme School District for 50 years, and at one point was the longest-serving elected official in the state of California. She was a formidable figure in this city and a great part of our history, and I ask that the meeting be adjourned in her memory today.
Madam Clerk, if you could make certain the minutes reflect that. Great. Okay, before we sign off, we kind of continued the closed session item to now. What's the druthers of the council?
Reschedule.
Okay, I think that let's do that. We're on for the 7th of August. Let's just ride the coattails of that meeting. All right, we're at this point at open forum. I don't have any cards, and we got a dwindling audience, but you're welcome to address us. Seeing no rush to the podium, I will adjourn our meeting and concurrently continue, I guess, the closed session, or just...
I don't think that matters.
It doesn't matter.
Re-agendize it, it's the same.
Okay.
It's not a public notice item, so it doesn't save us
Okay,
anything.
so we'll consider it closed for tonight.
You got to get your application.